Great place to raise a family.
But for one Tallahassee family, this Saturday is anything but tranquil.
Hey, it's Brandy. Leave a message.
Hey, Brandy, it's Mom again. Give me a call when you get this.
Brandy's family members hadn't heard from her, which was very unusual.
Her mother was starting to feel that unsettling feeling.
And as her worry grows, Brandy's mother makes another call.
Brandy's mother called a neighbor who lived across the street.
She had her go over and see if she was all right.
It's probably nothing, but
It's no problem at all. I was just walking out the door anyway. I'm gonna call you back, okay?
That intuition is not something that is easily ignored.
When the neighbor gets to Brandy's house, her mother's intuition proves correct.
Brandy?
She looked through the window and saw Brandy Peters' body there in the foyer.
Brandy!
27-year-old Brandy Peters grew up in a tight-knit family.
She was very family-oriented. Loved the family.
They spent a lot of time together. She was definitely very loved.
You could even say she was a little spoiled.
She was the baby. So I would say she probably was the diva of the family.
She was real feisty.
And she always turned the boys' heads.
She was into dressing nice. She was a beautiful girl. Guys was after her.
But Brandy had her sights on something different. At 21, she started dating a man named Mario Michaels.
He was much older than us.
It wasn't exactly the most stable of relationships. It was very tumultuous.
He was always in and out of jail.
But when Mario wasn't behind bars, there was little doubt they were in love.
They had a good relationship.
They also had 2 children together, twin girls.
She took on that motherly role. She loved them.
But with Mario frequently out of the picture, Brandy was often raising the kids on her own.
It was very difficult for Brandy.
Because it's a struggle doing it by yourself.
What she needed was someone she could depend on. Someone who wasn't Mario.
She was looking for someone who had a good job, had his head on his shoulder, wasn't in and out of jail, and could be a part of the kid's life.
Brandy thought she might have found him in 28-year-old Henry Segura.
Her and Henry met at a gas station, traded numbers.
How are you?
I'm good.
When they started dating, it looked as if Henry checked all the boxes.
He wasn't in the streets. He wasn't a convicted felon. He wasn't living that lifestyle.
He also had a good job.
How was the drive over?
He was an over-the-road welder.
He traveled from job site to job site.
And he was good with her kids.
He had actually a very close relationship with the twins.
She thought she had someone that was different. She thought she had met the real thing.
There was only one problem.
Do you want to tell me why I got a call today from your wife?
Henry Segura was married.
I'm sorry. The news came as quite a shock to Brandy. I didn't mean for all this to happen.
Why didn't you tell me?
Look, it's not what you think.
Henry told Brandy that he and his wife were on the verge of splitting up.
That can be really challenging, wanting them to choose you and remaining in that situation.
A situation made even more difficult by the fact that Brandy was carrying Henry's son.
What do we do now?
It's going to be fine. I'm not going anywhere.
He has displayed himself as a decent provider, father figure to the girls, and now it's like I'm having his child, so I have to weigh my options, and she stayed.
But after the birth of their child, Brandy came to a realization.
It became clear to her that he had no intention of leaving his wife.
She said, I'll always be a number 2 or 3 in this person's life.
Brandy broke things off with Henry and spent the next 2 years starting over as a single mom.
She was just trying to get on her feet.
To be there for 3 children is not easy.
But she rose to the occasion.
She got a new home and a new job.
She was doing home health. She was a home health aide.
She was looking forward to what the future holds.
Only now, the bright future Brandy imagined may never come to pass.
Unable to get a hold of Brandy, her mother called a neighbor to go knock on Brandy's door.
Brandy! She saw her laying in the foyer. She saw a large amount of blood. Brandy! And called law enforcement.
When officers arrive on scene, they make forced entry into the home.
She's inside.
But there's nothing they can do for Brandy.
She had gunshot wounds. There appeared to be trauma to her head.
She was dead at the scene.
Then, responding officers clear the rest of Brandy's house.
The officers had to make sure there weren't any other victims, but also make sure the suspect isn't there.
There's no sign of the shooter.
But in the bathroom, the officers made a horrific discovery.
Here we got more bodies.
Years creating a stable life for her 3 children after ending her relationship with the father of her youngest.
She was married the whole time.
Because it had been a struggle, but she was really starting to get focused on, let me get the kids settled in school, let me focus on where I need to take my career.
But now, Brandy's fresh start has come to a tragic end.
Brandy and her 3 children are dead.
No one had had any contact with her since the night before.
When homicide detectives arrive at the scene, they start by examining Brandy's body, which lies just inside the front door.
There was a bloodied crime scene right there in the foyer.
She'd been beaten and has what appear to be gunshot wounds.
Suspiciously, though, no casings were there. So that tells us 2 things. Either it was cleaned up or someone used a revolver.
And while Brandy died in the foyer, detectives can tell the attack wasn't confined to that area.
A violent struggle occurred in there.
There was a large amount of blood down the hallway.
The children, on the other hand, appear to have been drowned.
The person who committed the crime ended up putting all 3 children in the bathtub together.
Who does this? Who would kill kids and then not only that, but drown them in a bathtub?
That's just not something you see very often.
While the CSI team finishes inside, detectives speak with the neighbor who found Brandy.
The neighbor was a good friend of Brandy's. They would go to pick up their children together from school.
She had no idea who might have done this.
Brandy, she's good people.
When the detectives talk to other neighbors, they're just as shocked by what happened.
There was a lot of community concern. This is a small little raise your family type of community, and not that's ever supposed to happen, but you definitely don't want it happening here.
However, while the neighbors are understandably worried about a killer coming into their community, the detectives don't believe they're dealing with a random crime.
There was no forced entry into the residence, so that led them to believe that she must have known this person.
A lack of forced entry isn't the only thing that suggests Brandy knew her killer.
It was just such a brutal attack. Gunshot after gunshot and blow after blow. Law enforcement thought it was very personal.
Is that what detectives are dealing with here? Eager to find out, they turn to Brandy's family, who have started arriving at the scene as word of the murders spreads.
It was just a tough moment that day, you know, when get a phone call saying Brandy and the girls had been killed.
I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you a few questions first.
We really were trying to gather as much information. We were doing that to the best we can.
It was tough. This is something that happened at your back door with your own family.
Oh, I can't believe it. I just saw them.
When was that?
Oh, yesterday, around 5 o'clock.
She was supposed to take the twins with her for a sleepover, but the twins didn't want to go.
And that was the last time you saw her?
Yeah. Well, we talked a little later on the phone around 7, but she didn't answer again after that.
Turning to Brandy's relationships, her mother says she never approved of Henry Segura, her grandson's father.
She made me aware that Henry was married.
Was Brandy okay with that?
For the most part.
She was like, it is what it is.
What about Henry's wife?
Yeah. He went back to her.
She said Henry didn't really come around much after the baby was born.
He would bring diapers over, but he couldn't really be involved.
And the twins' dad?
Mario? Yeah, he's around.
Mario would bring them birthday presents. Mario would bring them Christmas gifts. They did communicate.
But Brandy's mother said she's not a big fan of Mario either.
He was in the streets, putting the streets first.
However, that isn't the only thing Brandy's mother has against Mario.
According to Brandy's mother, Mario was a deadbeat dad.
She just took him to court.
The week of the homicide, he was ordered to pay child support.
How much did he owe?
Around $20,000, maybe a little more.
Detectives investigating the murder of Brandy Peters and her 3 children have learned a judge recently ordered her ex-boyfriend, Mario Michaels, to pay Brandy more than $20,000 in back child support.
Often individuals would prefer not to go through the state. They can resolve those disputes amicably. And it sounds like that was the only option that she felt like she had at that point.
She said, if you're not gonna be a stand-up guy, then I'm gonna have to go another route with your child support.
Could the judgment against Mario have anything to do with the murders?
He definitely is a person of interest.
And the detectives won't have any trouble finding him.
He was beside himself with grief. This man was hurt.
But just because Mario was showing emotion still doesn't mean he didn't do it.
Questioned by the detectives, Mario insists he didn't have anything to do with the murders.
How did you hear about what happened?
He explained to me that he got word through the grapevine, so to speak, that an incident had occurred.
Well, we heard that you and Brandy weren't getting along too well.
It was just money issues. He didn't deny that he'd have problems with Brandy over the thousands owed in child support. I know I owe her, I just don't have it.
He provided us information about Brandy, their relationship, his relationship with his daughters.
He definitely wouldn't have hurt his own girls. He loved those twins.
Okay, so where were you last night?
With my girlfriend at a motel.
He was cooperative with police as far as giving them information.
Why don't you and I go talk?
Not only was Mario cooperative, it appears he is telling the truth.
When the detectives followed up on his alibi, the motel had a record of him being there that night. And his girlfriend said he never left the room.
Thank you so much.
With Mario apparently in the clear, Detectives move on to Henry Segura, the father of Brandy's youngest child.
He agreed to come to talk with us. He was very even-keeled, very calm, very cordial, but that's not unusual. Everybody grieves differently.
And when detectives asked about his relationship with Brandy, Henry admitted it was complicated.
It started off as an affair, and it was supposed to go into something else, but for whatever reason, that never transpired. But he and Brandy were working it out.
What kind of person is she?
Spunky. She's down to earth. She's real sweet. She's a cool person.
But he says things went downhill with Brandy once his wife learned about the affair.
She caught me on the phone bill one day. Seen the phone bill, saying I was calling this number a lot.
Henry said his wife had confronted Brandy about the affair.
She just would tell her, stop messing with me and yada, yada, yada.
But Brandy was kind of like throwing gas on the fire.
She texted my wife, called her something fat, something.
According to Henry, that's when he decided to cut things off.
I said, I'm tired of you just being disrespectful to my wife. I said, I don't think me and you mess around with her.
He had to break it off with Brandy, and he got back with his wife.
But investigators wonder, was this too little, too late?
Your wife doesn't like Brandy, does she?
She didn't like her that much, no. Unless she wouldn't kill her.
But would Henry?
They asked him when was the last time he had seen Brandy.
I was in her house Wednesday.
This past Wednesday?
That's 48 hours before the killings.
What you're doing here? What's going on?
Just seeing it Wednesday.
Okay.
Henry explains that he couldn't see his son as often as he liked.
It was my first time going there in a while.
But he said he was trying to do right by them.
I put myself on child support.
So she never filed the paperwork for it? You did it?
I did it myself.
Henry also has an alibi for the evening of the murder.
He said, I was at home. He told them, you can check my cell phone. Check with my wife.
Are there any other numbers?
He even agrees to give detectives a DNA sample.
He was cooperative.
And when the detectives pull his cell phone records, they confirm that he was home on the evening of the murder.
His wife also told police that she and Henry spent the evening at home.
Okay, bye-bye.
However, just as the investigation seems to be at a dead end,
Homicide, Lewis.
a friend of Brandy's contacts the detectives with a new lead.
I have some information. I'm not sure if it's connected, but I thought you should know.
She said Brandy had been in contact with a federal prison inmate named Enrique Sanchez.
Enrique has been writing letters to Brandy.
These letters that he sent, they were threatening.
Bonding with a prison inmate named Enrique Sanchez.
This girl, her peoples was, locked up, and she had somebody that was looking for someone to be a pen pal with.
Mr. Sanchez sent Brandy letters from the Department of Corrections.
For the person serving time, it helps them feel like they have someone in their corner. They don't feel like they have to do that time alone.
And Brandy got something out of it too.
She's a single mom. She has 3 kids. She has a lot going on in her life. So to be able to communicate with someone and have a connection with someone that you really don't have to make time for, that might have been something that she was able to gain that connection and that stimulation from, but not devote a lot of her actual energy or time to.
But their casual relationship eventually took a serious turn.
Yeah, he actually proposed to her.
Enrique told Brandy he wasn't just any inmate.
He said that he was a high-level member of a criminal organization out of Chicago and promised Brandy fortune just to marry him.
The friend admits that Brandy was intrigued by Enrique's offer.
But she also wondered if it was a little too good to be true.
She was really hesitant.
Brandy became suspicious of Mr. Sanchez.
According to Brandy's friend, when she declined Enrique's offer, he refused to take no for an answer.
He became a little bit obsessed, just, like talking crazy.
And 2 days before the murder, Enrique sent Brandy a menacing letter. And in the letter, he accused her of being disloyal.
Was it just a coincidence? Or did it have something to do with Brandy's death?
If Enrique was some sort of gang leader, he could have arranged a hit.
It was such a violent crime. I don't know of another crime as violent as this in Tallahassee. Thank you.
When the detectives received the autopsy results, there's no doubt they're dealing with a cold-hearted killer.
Brandy was shot 8 times.
They've also found evidence that one of the children had been shot.
We thought all 3 were drowned. We found one was shot in the head.
2 of those children were alive when they were put in that bathtub, and their 3rd sibling was used to hold them down. I don't even know what to say. It's awful.
To explore the possibility that Brandy and her children were the victims of a gang hit, the detectives set up an interview with Enrique in federal prison.
During an investigation, we have to go down every single lead.
Okay, yes, she turned down my proposal, but that doesn't mean that I killed her.
However, he does repeat the claim that he's a high-ranking member of the powerful Vice Lords gang.
Mr. Sanchez said that he was involved in various other criminal activities that were somewhat high profile. Gave us quite the story.
But detectives came away from the interview suspecting it was just that, a story.
And we pretty much figured out that he wasn't fully there.
There definitely are indicators that he's suffering from a severe mental illness.
And when detectives did a little digging, they discovered he wasn't in prison for anything gang-related.
The reason why he's incarcerated was for sending threatening letters to governors.
And he was someone who kind of perpetually took credit for a lot of different crimes.
With Enrique looking like a dead end, the detectives regroup.
Hoping for a new lead, they subpoenaed Brandy's cell phone records.
When we're doing a homicide investigation, it's like casting a net for fishing. See what comes back.
The records show that on the day of the murder, Brandy had been in frequent contact with a number registered to a man named Aaron Bishop.
So we immediately had an interview with him.
Do you know a woman named Brandy Peters?
No, I never heard of her.
Figuring they've caught Aaron in a lie, the detectives confront him about the calls from his phone.
Aaron's like, what? Hold on, what phone?
When detectives explained, he said he'd given that phone to a coworker.
This coworker have a name?
Yes, Henry Segura.
Which means that shortly before her death, Brandy had been on the phone with her ex-boyfriend.
Murder of Brandy Peters and her 3 children have reason to believe she'd been in contact with her ex, Henry Segura, in the hours leading up to the murders.
It started when they traced the number from Brandy's phone records to a friend of Henry's named Aaron Bishop.
They worked together doing jobs on the welding site.
We were out on the job and I messed up my phone.
He had spilt a drink on top of the phone and the phone stopped working.
Aaron says he'd given the phone to Henry.
Henry takes the phone, puts it in a bag of rice, which is a technique to dry out your phone, and he realized that it still worked.
He asked me if I wanted it back, but I'd already got a new one, so I said he could keep it.
So now Henry thought in his mind, well, oh, okay, cool. I have a second phone that doesn't have my name on it.
Remember, that's how Henry's wife initially found out about his affair with Brandy.
She caught me on the phone bill.
Had he also lied about having a second phone?
Are there any other numbers?
To be sure, the detectives subpoena the tower records for Aaron's old phone.
What they learned could be the key to solving this case.
That phone was at Brandy Peters' house the night of the murder.
Literally on top of the crime scene, right on top of it. And it had been there for hours prior to the murder.
All the detectives need to do now is prove that it was Henry doing the stalking. And the phone records may reveal a way to do it.
Brandy's number wasn't the only one that popped up in the phone records.
Whoever had the phone had also been in regular contact with a number registered to a woman named Letitia Lyle.
Hello? They spoke to her and she confirmed she was talking to Henry Segura on that phone.
The phone came up under another name, but it was always Henry.
So, why did he use another phone?
Well, he's married.
She was another girl he was having a relationship with.
She was enamored with Henry Segura. She thought that this was a relationship that was going to go somewhere.
But Letitia says she'd recently seen another side of Henry.
He had anger problems.
She noticed how much of a temper that he had.
Like, he put his hands on you?
No, nothing like that. He was just angry all the time.
What about?
This girl, he said she was always trying to put a kid on him.
According to Letitia, he just was venting and venting and venting about Brandy and the situation about the child support. And the fact that he had to pay this money to Brandy for a child that he didn't even think was his.
Which sounds an awful lot like a motive for murder.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Bye.
After Letitia confirms that Henry had a second secret phone, the detectives bring him in for another round of questioning.
What's your other cell phone number?
I have no other cell phone.
Of course, the detectives know that's not true.
I know you have a second.
Once he realizes the detectives have caught him in the lie, he admits he had another phone. In the past.
That was a while ago. That was before Brandy passed away.
He used it to talk to girls he was seeing on the side.
What did you do with it? I mean,
throw it away.
Why'd you throw a phone away?
So I don't need it.
When detectives asked when exactly he got rid of that phone, he was just as vague.
I don't remember. I just remember getting rid of the phone. I don't want her to find the phone. Like I say, I don't see where that has anything to do with this.
The detectives, on the other hand, believe Henry's lies about the phone tie everything together.
He never told police about that second cell phone because he knew that with that information, they'd be able to see that his location was consistent with Brandy Peters' house the night of this murder.
I know you were over at her house on Friday. Okay?
We confronted Henry about that information, and at that point, he declined to cooperate any further in the investigation.
I don't answer no more of y'all questions. I don't like the way y'all seem like you're trying to railroad me into being someone that killed a lady and her kids, which being one of my children. I don't have anything to say. Y'all still need to question me. Can I go home now?
For now, detectives have no choice but to let Henry go.
We never felt we had the wrong person. But the evidence we had in this case was very circumstantial. You had a phone, you had a timeline.
And we know he had a motive.
So, to learn more about that motive, detectives dig into the court records.
What they uncover confirms what Letitia told them.
He was ordered to pay a lot of money in child support.
In fact, he owed Brandy even more money than Mario.
investigating the murder of single mom Brandy Peters and her 3 small children have discovered that Henry Segura, the father of her youngest child, owed her a significant amount of child support.
Henry told police that he had put himself on child support.
She never filed the paperwork for it. You did it?
I didn't, sir.
But what he hadn't told them was that he'd gotten significantly behind on his payments.
He's an over-the-road welder. He can have a job 1 month and not have a job for 2 more months.
However, in talking to Henry's co-workers, the detectives learned that he had a plan to deal with his money problems.
Henry had a chance to go to Afghanistan to do military contracting as a welder and get 6 figures.
However, there was one big problem in his plan.
If you have child support payments outstanding, then you cannot leave the country.
With Brandy and their son standing between him and a potential 6-figure payoff, the detectives believe Henry had made a choice.
He felt that he'd be much better off if she was dead and maybe even the kid.
And when the detectives receive the results of the forensics testing from the crime lab, they're convinced that Henry had done the unthinkable to get rid of his child support problems.
Henry Segura's DNA is on the grab bar of the bathtub.
That puts him at the scene where the children were drowned.
Finally, in September of 2011, more than a year after the murders, the authorities place Henry under arrest for murder.
When he was arrested, we attempted to speak to him again, but he didn't want to talk.
In fact, the news that Henry had been arrested for killing both Brandy and his own son leaves nearly everyone speechless.
When it came out that he was involved, it was a shock to think that he could do something like this.
The crime was so heinous that soon after Henry's arrest, prosecutors announced that they would be seeking the death penalty.
It's one of the worst cases I've ever looked at, and if you have kids, your stomach turns. And if anybody deserved death penalty, it was going to be the subject that did this.
There was no offers and no deals.
When Henry goes on trial for murder, the prosecutors maintain that his motive was simple.
Henry Segura committed these murders because he didn't want to pay child support.
It's a need to take back control. The emotional side takes over the rational side.
And according to the prosecutors, there is no doubt that it was Henry who killed Brandy and the kids.
We know from his second cell phone that he was there that night.
And then his DNA being on the bathtub of the house.
What do you want now, Henry?
The prosecutors also argue that Henry's actions that night prove the crime was premeditated.
You have your main phone at home to create an alibi, and then took your second phone with you.
Then he'd gone over to Brandy's house.
We need to talk.
Okay. Come in.
But at some point, after he'd gotten in the door, Henry pulled his gun.
Brandy went to try to either get the phone or even get, whatever weapon she may have had. And I think he started to shoot as she was going down the hall. And then she was beat to death by the gun. But she was not gonna go down without a fight, especially for those children. She fought that fight for her kids.
Once Brandy was dead, Henry went looking for his son. But he'd made a miscalculation.
I don't think the twins were supposed to be home. I think it was just supposed to be his son and Brandy at the house. And now he realizes he has to take care of all of them.
How could you do such a thing? To have taken the life of your own flesh and blood, and innocent children, and the mother of your child? He's a monster.
and you kill your son in order for you not to have to pay $20,000 in child support? 20 grand, bro?
There was no conscience there. He cared more about protecting himself and protecting his lifestyle.
When it's the defense's turn, they argue that Henry is totally innocent.
The defense in this case was always Henry didn't do it. You got the wrong person.
And when the defense put Henry on the stand, he certainly did not look like a killer.
He gets his direct from his defense attorney. It comes across clean, calm, he's cool, collected, no issues.
But the defense's strategy isn't without risk.
We knew that he definitely wasn't always respectful of women. Just looking at the evidence in his cell phone, how he talked to the women he was in relationships with.
He had anger problems.
So let's see how he reacts to being questioned by a woman.
The cross-examination by Sarah Dugan allowed the jury to see the true colors of Henry.
When he felt challenged, especially by a woman, he realized and started lashing back at her.
The switch flips, and you get to see the monster that's inside him.
The jury definitely saw it.
Henry Segura was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder.
However, they stopped short of the death penalty.
Henry Segura was sentenced to life in prison.
The family can finally have closure. Justice was served. It's done. The book is closed on this one.
But no amount of prison time will ever make up for the pain Henry caused, or the lives he took.
This will always be just a sad tragedy. I could never really understand.
Being in love requires a leap of faith. Following someone into the great unknown, hoping to find your happily ever after. But when passion and devotion are twisted into obsession and control, that leap of faith can feel like being pushed off a cliff. Plummeting into an abyss where everything you know, even yourself, slowly falls further and further away until you hit 2017, Detroit, Michigan. It's a quiet evening in the city once known as the crime capital of America. But Detroit has made a comeback, and many who call the community home have invested in the rebuild to promote change.
People are making neighborhoods safer, helping police enforcement to stop criminal behavior and activity.
But in one Detroit community, a single gunshot sends those efforts up in smoke.
Detroit 911. We just had a robbery. Our employee is dying. Is he breathing? Yes, he's breathing. He's losing too much blood. I need you to stay with me. I request the police and EMS.
Police rushed to the scene, an auto parts store on Schaefer Highway, 10 miles northwest of downtown.
All they knew at that particular time that it was a robbery and a shooting.
There's blood around an older male on the floor suffering a gunshot wound.
He was shot in the head and in grave condition.
When you go to a scene like that, it strikes down in your own heart.
We had to catch the persons that was involved.
As EMTs rush the victim to a nearby hospital, responding officers cordon off the scene. But as they dig into the investigation, they will discover there is more to this robbery and to the individual that pulled the trigger than meets the eye. "23-year-old Detroit native Shantae Anderson was a dedicated mom to her young daughter of 4.
She's a young single mom, doing the best that she can.
The pregnancy had been a bit of a shock to Shantae, as well as to the child's father.
We was in a year-long relationship, and unbeknownst to me, I was pregnant.
The father didn't stick around after the baby was born, but that only made Shantae more determined to provide for her little girl.
She said, I'm a strong woman. I can do this myself. I want to be able to take care of her. So I'm going to go ahead and try to become a professional woman.
My goal was to become a preschool teacher. So I went to school for early childhood development.
Shantae leaned on her family while she studied toward her degree.
I had family support. When it came to my daughter, my mom and my sisters did watch her while I worked and went to school.
With a close family and a beautiful baby girl, Shantae felt lucky. But there was one thing missing.
Most young women at that age desire some form of companionship.
She said, I don't need a man to help me, but I want somebody that I can love.
And Shantae soon found love with an old family friend, 39-year-old Leviticus Cooper.
I knew him, most of my life growing up. He was a friend of my dad's and my uncle's.
Even though Leviticus was 16 years older than Shantae, she felt safe with him.
There is this paternal element to it, protector, provider, father figure. All of these elements make it very easy for someone to fall in love.
If I ever needed anything, I could just call him. Without a shadow of a doubt, he was there to fix it.
For Shantae, her connection with Leviticus grew even stronger after a death in her family.
When my uncle passed away, he had stuck around and helped my great-grandma. It kind of attracted me to him.
They started talking, they started really connecting.
But little did Shantae know that the love of her life was harboring a secret. One that would propel Shantae down a dark path, into a life she barely recognized, into a decision that came with fatal consequences. Detectives have been dispatched to an auto parts store on Detroit's west side.
When the police got to the scene, they noticed a man that was shot in the head.
The victim, still breathing, was immediately taken to the hospital.
He was identified as 69-year-old James Holler.
He was the store manager.
Detectives speak to Mr. Haller's employees. It's clear he was loved by everyone who knew him.
He was well known in the area and a stalwart citizen in the community.
James Holler is a war vet. He took up this job, this kind of a part-time gig in retirement.
He was a hard-working man, always made sure we had clothes on our back and food on the table.
He loved us, he loved his kids, and he took care of us. He did what he was supposed to do as a man and as a father.
Now, as the beloved Mr. Haller fights for his life at the hospital, detectives must ascertain what happened.
The employees stated that 2 women had entered and looked around the store. At some point, one woman produced a gun.
And they announced a holdup.
The store employees stated that approximately $100 was taken.
Before they made off with the stolen cash, one of the women fired a single gunshot, striking Mr. Haller in the head. As he fell to the floor, the 2 women fled the scene.
They got away in a dark color SUV with a back window that was busted out, but it was covered with plastic.
There was a third suspect, a getaway driver.
As detectives wrap up their eyewitness interviews, they receive word from the hospital.
James Holler died from his injuries.
I couldn't take it. It didn't seem real. I was very upset, very hurt.
I was upset and I was mad. The only thing really running through my mind was why? That don't even make sense. For all things, in all places, why?
Who would want to do such a thing to a beloved member of the community? To help answer that question, detectives checked the store's surveillance cameras.
And the perpetrators could be seen on video.
They could see that it was just two black females.
The videos provide a solid visual description of the perpetrators, with both of them and the getaway driver still at large. Detectives know time is of the essence.
You've got two gun women that are on the loose, and who knows what they're capable of next.
As detectives fan out in search of the suspects, they will uncover a twisted affair, one that compelled not one, but two women to rob, steal, and murder, all in the name of love.
She loved him. It's just that simple. And unfortunately, life moves faster than our moral compass.
Shantae Anderson is a young mother who found love where she least expected it. In the arms of Leviticus Cooper, a family friend 16 years her senior.
Me and him had fun a lot, and I loved him.
She was deeply devoted to Leviticus. Her love was unwavering.
But after a few months of blissful romance, Shantae discovered that Leviticus had been harboring a shocking secret.
Unfortunately, this honeymoon phase doesn't last long for her. Turns out Leviticus has another life.
A life that, as fate would have it, would inextricably link Shantae Anderson to the armed robbery that left 69-year-old James Haller Jr. dead on the floor of the Detroit auto parts store he managed.
He had a good reputation. He was a kind person. He was a nice person. A lot of people knew Mr. Haller, and a lot of people were pissed.
The only thing really running through my mind was find out who did it and where they at.
Armed with surveillance footage of the two shooters, police hold a press conference the day after the shooting.
Certainly the unthinkable happened, unsensible, unnecessary, cowardly. We're relentless, and we're going to arrest you.
The victim's family also made a plea for the perpetrators.
I just want to say, you took something that can't be replaced. That man raised me, took care of me, fed me, made sure I went to school every day.
You see the family talking to the crowd and, all these microphones and all these cameras right in front of your face. You try to just suck it up and do it in the mere effort to try to find who killed your loved one.
Turn yourself in, because God gonna get you if the police don't. God gonna get you. You gotta pay for what you did. You took a father away, you took a husband away.
It was quite emotional. The wife, the children, everyone was upset.
You didn't have to shoot him! You didn't have to shoot him!
Police released the store's surveillance videos of the crime to the public, hoping someone in the community can ID the suspects.
We need you to call us, anybody with information. This family wants justice. We want justice.
There was a lot of publicity when this particular crime occurred because Mr. Haller, the victim, was a very popular person.
Tips pour in, and one caller says the woman in the video looks like a friend of his, named Shantae Anderson. Detectives immediately run a background check on Shantae.
They didn't find anything bad on her in her background. They found that she was trying to get an associate's degree. They found out that she had a kid.
In fact, police find evidence that Shantae is active in the fight against crime in her hometown.
She was being an activist for the community, helping police enforcement to stop criminal behavior and activity.
She volunteered her help to the Detroit 300 organization. Now, Detroit 300 goes around helping victims of crime and bringing attention to the most outrageous crimes.
So clearly she has a desire to help and give back.
Was this a case of mistaken identity? Or did Shantae suddenly break bad? And if so, why? Detectives head to Shantae's last known address in hopes of speaking with her.
A lot of times, right at the point where you just know this is the person, and then you have to start all over.
She says, no, there's been a mistake.
Believes she found her soulmate in older man Leviticus Cooper.
He's a man that is familiar to her, the stable figure, a man that has been around for many years, who she can depend on and rely on.
But Shantae would soon discover that the relationship wasn't built on trust, but rather on deception. And despite all the lies and prevarications, she'd wind up doing the unthinkable, all in the name of love. On November 3rd, 2 days after the murder of James Haller Jr., Detroit detectives stake out what they believe to be the home of Shantae Anderson, one of the female suspects caught on tape during the shooting.
They do surveillance on her last known address, and they see a woman matching her description leaving that residence.
Police have a photo of Shantae, and this woman looks exactly like her.
They go up to her and say, Shanta, put your hands up. She says, there's been a mistake. I'm not Shanta Anderson.
Detectives ask the woman to show them some identification.
She didn't have any ID on her.
Since she has no ID and she can't prove who she is, the police take her into custody.
At the station, detectives interrogate the unidentified woman.
Do you understand we're conducting a criminal investigation?
With me?
November the 1st, around 5 o'clock, where were you?
I was at home.
The woman continues to deny that she is Shantae Anderson.
Okay, I'm just gonna show you a picture real quick, okay? Who is that?
That's Shantae. That's my sister.
Investigators realize they do in fact have a case of mistaken identity.
We made a mistake. We thought you were your sister. And I apologize. When's the last time you saw her?
I haven't seen her since like the summertime. My boyfriend and her boyfriend got into it.
Who's her boyfriend?
I only know his nickname.
What's his name?
Nut.
Do you have a phone number for him?
No.
Unable to obtain the name or number of Shantae's boyfriend, detectives press Vanessa for the address where he and Shantae might be staying.
We stay on Frankel and Stansbury.
Frankel and Stansbury?
Mm-hmm.
Who lives over there with her?
I don't know who stayed there, but I know he be over there because it's her boyfriend.
On November 4th, 3 days after the shooting, police descend upon the address provided by Shantae's sister.
They announced, police search warrant, and no one was there.
The house is empty when they go in.
They had to clear the area to make sure there was nobody gonna attack them or anything else like that.
Once the house is cleared, detectives scour it for possible clues.
They just checked the whole area out. They were looking for weapons. They were looking for anything that allowed them to connect to that crime that they had.
On the counter, detectives find a stack of mail, but not all of it is addressed to Shantae.
They find mail belonging to another individual that lives there, a man named Leviticus.
Detectives now believe Leviticus is Shantae's boyfriend.
The police suspect that Leviticus may also be associated with the robbery and maybe the getaway driver.
Police also discover mail and an ID card belonging to a woman named Ebony McEwen Ross.
The mail belonging to Ebony verifies that she lives there.
But who is Ebony McEwen Ross? Is she the other woman in the surveillance video? The next morning, detectives search information on the two names found in the home.
They cross-check any social media accounts to determine how they're connected.
Police locate an account for 28-year-old Ebony McEwen Ross. Scrolling through Ebony's feed, they discover that she's friends with Shantae Anderson. But that's not all.
They found a picture of Ebony, and behind her was the exactly same vehicle that was involved in the shooting. The SUV, dark color, and the back window that was taped up
is the SUV seen leaving the auto parts store. Investigators find that Ebony has an SUV registered in her name.
Detectives put out an APB for Ebony's vehicle. They also put one out for another vehicle, one that's registered to Leviticus Cooper.
The police now believe they have identified 3 people involved in the robbery.
It isn't long before the APB on Leviticus's vehicle pays off.
Police did pull Leviticus over and they were able to arrest him.
Once Leviticus is in custody, he spills the beans on a romance involving not just Shantae Anderson, but Ebony McEwen Ross as well. A romance that was the catalyst for the murder of James Haller Jr.
These 2 women will do or die for their man, no matter what.
69-year-old James Haller Jr. Detroit police have identified 2 prime suspects in the case: Shantae Anderson and Ebony McEwen Ross.
Surveillance video shows both women there at the store where they committed this armed robbery.
The investigation has also yielded another person of interest, Leviticus Cooper, whom police believe to be Shantae's boyfriend.
Leviticus may also be involved in the robbery, maybe also the getaway driver.
While Shantae and Ebony seem to be in the wind, police have tracked down Leviticus and have brought him in for questioning. Detectives asked Leviticus about his relationship with Shantae Anderson. Leviticus characterizes it as something different than the once-in-a-lifetime romance envisioned by Shantae.
We've been messing around for 1.5 years.
You guys have a romantic relationship?
Yeah, we sexual.
But it's what Leviticus says about Ebony McEwen Ross that really piques detectives' attention.
We've been messing around for 5.5 years.
There was some type of love triangle going on.
I mean, you consider them girlfriends, right?
Yeah.
How'd this happen?
I was messing around both of them. They found out about each other.
According to Leviticus, Shantae was initially devastated to learn that he was seeing another woman.
This crushes Shantae because she's in love with him.
Not that Ebony was exactly thrilled to learn about Shantae either.
They know that it was few. I'm saying, I'm not gonna be neither one of y'all.
He was sleeping with both of us, and she looking at me like, this is my man, and I'm looking at her like, this is my man.
These women are having to vie for time, affection, commitment, attention. So it does create this kind of messy system of competition.
Leviticus says that's when he offered a solution that he described as a win-win-win.
Leviticus proposed that they all be in a relationship together.
Because I got love for both girls, man.
Leviticus says Ebony seemed cool with the proposal, but that Shantae had some misgivings, though eventually she came around.
She's thinking, if I leave, I'm no longer gonna have this man in my life. I'm gonna be alone.
She decides, I think I can deal with this.
I agreed to it mainly because I loved him and I saw the good in him. When you love somebody like that, I have no choice but either to accept it or reject it.
That tells you that he has a command over both of the women, that they would even say this is an okay thing for us to do.
Leviticus is a strong personality. Both the women are romantically attracted to him, and it almost becomes cult-like.
And they're your living girlfriends, right?
Yeah.
He has 2 women that are there for his pleasure to support and provide for his emotional needs as well.
For any man to have 2 girlfriends living together, know about each other, and are totally satisfied and okay with that. Very unusual relationship.
But there was one person who Leviticus had no desire to make room for: Shantae's 4-year-old daughter.
Where's her daughter at? She's not at the house, right?
No.
Her daughter ends up moving in with her mother.
It was a big dysfunctional relationship.
Detectives are stunned by Leviticus's candid revelations. But what they really want to know is if Shantae and Ebony were behind the murder of James Haller Jr. Leviticus wastes no time throwing both his women under the bus.
These 2 did it, right? There's no question, right?
The question was asked, well, were you the driver? And he says no.
I think you're lying. I swear to God. I ain't got nothing to do with this. I'm telling you the honest to God truth, sir. I would never tell him to do no like that because I love him so much. I wouldn't put him in harm's way.
Leviticus explains he didn't even know about the crime until the day after.
He says that after the crime, he met up with Miss Anderson and she told him what occurred.
She wanted you to meet up with her?
And that's when she told me what happened.
What's the first thing she said?
You know, she instantly started crying. You know what I mean? Saying I ain't got no place to go. She's saying, I know it was wrong. One thing led to another. Before I know it, we came up with the idea of robbing. We went in there, told me, baby, and I shot her. I think like, you killed him, Dante. Are they looking for you, sweetie? You killed that man. I'm like, man, what gun at?
Did she tell you where the gun's at?
Said she threw it, that's it. She didn't tell me where.
Leviticus also tells detectives where to find Shantae.
Leviticus told the police that he hid her at his grandmother's house.
When you receive information on where a wanted person may be, you want to take the right steps and be cautious, especially if that person may be armed at that time.
As for Ebony, Leviticus claims he hasn't seen her.
Where do you think she's at?
I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea.
Detectives asked Leviticus what drove these two women, especially a once hard-working single mom like Shantae, to commit such a brutal crime.
Leviticus thought that the motive dealt with the fact that it was his birthday. They wanted to surprise him. They wanted to buy him a gift. So they decided, because they had no money, to rob this store.
Detectives find that statement hard to believe. But with Ebony McEwen Ross still MIA, detectives shift their focus to bringing Shantae Anderson into custody.
Police goes to the house. They surround it. They're hoping that she'll surrender peacefully.
She gave herself up. They arrested her without any kind of situation or anything.
However, Ebony is nowhere to be found.
With Shantae in custody, detectives hope they'll soon learn the true motive behind this seemingly senseless shooting, and how a good girl like Shantae wound up on the wrong side of the law.
I feel like if I was not dating him, I wouldn't have been put in no situation.
Of the two women who they believe is responsible for the robbery murder that killed James Haller Jr.
She comes out of the home and surrenders without incident.
Back at the station, detectives grill Shantae about her involvement in the crime.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've worked around the police a lot. I'm very smart. And it's not that I don't want to answer your questions, but I prefer just to get a legal advisor's advice.
That's fair, but you know, it's some pretty hefty allegations that's been levied against you. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so you know, when you put it all together and it goes over to the prosecutor's office, they're gonna make their decision whether you say anything or not. Okay.
Detectives lay out the charges against her. For Shantae, it's an almost out-of-body experience.
It didn't feel real. That's not me. Actually taking somebody's life. I've never been in trouble in my life. It just felt like, no, this can't be.
People suppress information. If I don't say it out loud, and if I keep convincing myself I'm a good person, then it never happened.
With Shantae still refusing to answer questions, detectives decide to terminate the interview. Between Leviticus Cooper's initial statement and the surveillance video from the shooting, detectives have enough evidence to charge Shantae with felony murder and armed robbery.
They had very strong evidence against her in this particular case. In Michigan, that's mandatory life in prison if convicted without parole.
A week after Shantae's arrest, the search for Ebony McEwen Ross comes to an end.
Ebony surrenders eventually to the police.
There's nothing to hide for her anymore, and there's no benefit to hiding.
She came to the police station, got out of that SUV. They had seen the surveillance video, announced who she was, and was taken into custody. They're not really sure where she was during that period of time, and she did not elaborate on it.
Unlike Shantae, Ebony has plenty to say to detectives.
Was it your idea to go there or not?
No.
Whose idea was
it? It was Shantae's idea.
It was Shantae's idea to do the robbery?
Yeah, I didn't know what was gonna happen until I got there.
Have you guys ever done anything like this in the past?
Never. Never.
What were you guys doing it for?
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I wish I did. I wish I had an answer for that family. I don't.
What do you make of all this?
My life is over. The life that I planned for myself.
Detectives press Ebony on Leviticus's involvement, but she immediately shuts them down.
There is speculation that Leviticus was the getaway driver.
Did Leviticus have anything to do with any of this? So what was Leviticus's role at all, if anything?
None.
She didn't give him up, didn't say he was involved at all.
Ebony tells detectives a man named J-Rock was the one driving the getaway car.
How can we identify J-Rock? How can I find him? Do you know anything about him?
Nothing. And that's the worst part. I know nothing.
During the investigation, nobody came up with a rock.
She very well may have been protecting Leviticus. They went all the way to rob a store for him just to get him a gift.
Ebony McEwen Ross is charged with felony murder and 2 counts of armed robbery.
The police were never able to actually figure out who the driver was or to actually implicate Leviticus more than harboring after the fact.
For helping Shantae lay low after the shooting, Leviticus Cooper is formally charged with accessory after the fact.
Leviticus was charged because he let her hide at his grandmother's house after the shooting.
With Leviticus, Ebony, and Shantae all in custody, one question remains. What truly led Shantae Anderson to pull the trigger that fateful day?
In my professional opinion, women commit crimes for men because of love.
It doesn't have to be rational. It doesn't have to be logical. She loved him. And it led her to make some very destructive decisions.
Has been charged in the murder of military veteran and beloved community figure James Haller Jr. Another woman, Ebony McEwen Ross, has also been charged in the crime, which stemmed from the robbery of the auto parts store where Mr. Haller was the manager.
They were charged with felony murder, as well as 2 counts of armed robbery.
The investigation also revealed that the 2 young women were in a polyamorous relationship with 39-year-old Leviticus Cooper prior to the crime.
We're talking about a 39-year-old man with a 28 and a 23-year-old woman. In this relationship, this little love triangle, that's not, common.
As for Leviticus, he's been charged as an accessory after the fact. In his interview, Leviticus claimed he had nothing to do with the murder and told police he believes Shantae and Ebony committed the robbery in order to secure the necessary funds to buy him a birthday present.
They're doing this whole, it's your birthday, let's turn up. They want to make sure that they're pleasing to him.
It speaks to desperation. They engaged in this because Babe loved him.
Both women decide to forego a trial and take a plea deal. At her sentencing hearing, Shantae claims she has no memory of committing the crime.
I don't really remember what happened. It's like a fog.
She was highly inebriated with alcohol and weed throughout the day of the shooting.
To say that you had no memory because you've been drinking, I mean, we've all had a couple drinks, maybe gone a little bit too far, but you don't murder someone.
Shantae tells the courtroom that the true motive behind the crime was fear. Fear that she'd upset her man, Leviticus Cooper, who over the past few months had morphed from a loving, caring partner into something far more menacing.
Leviticus ends up becoming very controlling and possessive.
She takes orders and she obeys.
When you feel like you're in love with that person, you kind of overlook all the negative.
He was 16 years her senior when there's such a substantial age difference. There is an element of control and power.
Shantae says she considered leaving, but deep down, she still loved Leviticus.
Even when there was a negative going on, basically, I would make excuses.
She got so caught up in, I want to please him. I want to make sure that he still loves me.
Shantae says that on the afternoon of the crime, she and Ebony were hanging out, having a few drinks, worrying about what they could buy Leviticus for his birthday. Moments later, Leviticus's friend, a man Shantae claims they knew only as J-Rock, allegedly rolled up in Ebony's black SUV.
I remember J-Rock telling us that Leviticus said go ride with him somewhere.
Shantae explains that J-Rock suggested it was time to go shopping for Leviticus, whether the two women had money or not. Shantae and Ebony did as they were told.
Basically, anything Leviticus say goes. J-Rock knew that if he threw his name in there, that we were going to listen.
It was an opportunity for her to prove that her love was unwavering, that she was deeply devoted to Leviticus.
If J-Rock wouldn't have said his name, I wouldn't have agreed to nothing.
Whether J-Rock or perhaps even Leviticus encouraged Shantae and Ebony to commit the robbery is unclear. Because, as Shantae tells the court, from that point on, things get fuzzy.
We was drinking and smoking, so I really don't remember what happened.
When it's their turn, prosecutors pick up the story where Shantae left off and spell out what they believe happened inside the auto parts store on the evening of November 1st, 2017.
The two women arrived at the store.
They looked around and they only saw a few people that was inside.
Shantae pulls out a handgun and points it at the clerk.
Ebony starts taking the money out of the register.
Mr. Heller came out of the back. She raised a pistol and fired.
A single shot struck Mr. Heller in the head, causing him to collapse to the floor.
They ran out immediately after that.
The women jumped in the passenger side of the SUV. There appears that there was a getaway driver, but no one actually saw that individual.
It's a gruesome picture the prosecution paints. One made all the more gut-wrenching by the impact statement given by Mr. Haller's family just prior to sentencing.
Mr. Haller's wife, she's obviously very distraught, very angry, and very upset. She tells Miss Anderson, "You don't realize what you did. I wish I could hang you."
The judge sentences Shantae Anderson to 30 to 60 years in prison for her role as the shooter.
I was just pretty much numb, and I signed the plea deal and I left out the courtroom.
Shantae's lack of emotion doesn't sit well with the victim's family.
You made a poor life decision. Own up to it, instead of trying to be a little punk and run from it. Or at least show some damn remorse.
At her sentencing hearing, Ebony McEwen Ross receives a sentence of 21 to 50 years.
Ebony was very remorseful. She stood in front of the judge in tears.
Leviticus Cooper also pleads guilty to accessory after the fact for hiding Shantae at his grandmother's house.
These women will spend a good chunk of their lives in prison. He ends up getting 2.5 years probation.
As for the mysterious J-Rock, detectives were never able to locate him. Some of them question whether he even existed at all.
I believe that it was Leviticus that was driving. They could have been protecting him for the sake of protecting him because he was their lover.
In the eyes of the law, justice was served. But nothing can ever bring James Haller Jr. back to his family.
I have my moments where I cry. His presence is missed. He didn't just die, he was taken from me.
It's been rough. He was my hero, my Superman.
As for Shantae's daughter, she too has suffered the ripple effects of that fateful day in 2017.
Ultimately, other family members have to step up and take care of the child.
Think before you go do something stupid. You can turn people's lives upside down, including your own.
This is not how life was supposed to be.
They say that faith makes all things possible, and that love makes all things worthwhile. But what happens when you take that leap of faith with Mr. Wrong? How far is the fall? And once you've hit rock bottom, is there any way back up?
Even though Shantae says she's not going to be defined by this,
she was a hardworking mom and wife, determined to succeed.
Her husband was supporting her dreams.
She wanted the best for her kids and her family.
She ended up pulling herself up by the bootstraps.
She was a success story.
She was an entrepreneur. But now, she's a victim.
I just see blood coming out the back of her head.
They came in and tried to rob us.
This appeared to be a home invasion.
Y'all hurry up and get it.
The husband is distraught.
When the police arrive, he's holding his wife.
He's just pleading with her not to die.
But is anything about this case what it appears to be?
There was bad blood, bad feelings.
People become desperate.
It never even dawned on me.
They plotted all this up under me, under my nose, played me like a fool.
You should be charged with first-degree murder.
29th, 2017. It's early Thursday morning in Lake Worth, Florida, a town of 40,000 that runs along the water below West Palm Beach.
West Palm Beach is part of Palm Beach County, and it's more of an affordable area to live.
Lake Worth, especially suburban Lake Worth, is one of those sort of sprawling suburbs on the edges of West Palm Beach.
It is an area where families can feel safe in their homes or out in the community.
But safety is never guaranteed. A little after 2 a.m., Palm Beach County Dispatch receives a series of frantic 911 calls from a house on the south side of town.
911 emergency. Do you need the police or the paramedic? We need a paramedic here. They came in and tried to rob us and they shot us. You took the keys to my car. You had on the mask. Or you want the gunshot?
They need fire rescue immediately. Somebody's been shot.
He's not breathing.
You can hear the grief in his voice. You can hear just the anguish that he's going through.
Because according to the caller, the victim is his sister, Makiva Jenkins.
Get here now, my sister is dying for her life.
Makiva Jenkins was grounded by faith and family.
She loved her family. She loved the Lord. Church was very important to her faith.
She was a real sweet girl, you know, she was really a God-fearing person. She loved to go to church. She loved to do things, you know, go out and have fun.
It was through a church event that the 34-year-old single mom met her husband, Yuri Jenkins, in 2010.
Both Yuri's parents were pastors. His father was a pastor of a church. His mother was a minister.
Yuri's mom was at a church convention with him, and Makiva was there too. And she had already knew who his mom was, but to see him with his mom, it was like, oh, who is that?
There is a sense of divine intervention. You're like, wow, we have the same thing in common, and he believes in God. That right there can definitely spark some interest.
I wish your mother would have told me how handsome her son is.
Beautiful thing. To see her face, you know, how happy she was.
The next few years were happy ones.
Makiva had a daughter from a previous relationship, but Yuri took her in as his own. They had really built a wonderful life together.
She ended up putting herself through college. She was so driven to succeed because she really just wanted the best for her daughter and her family.
Yuri helped take care of Makiva's daughter so that she could attend classes, but he also made extra money on the side.
He was a barber, and people came to him to get their hair cut.
The couple also welcomed a new baby in 2011, a son.
But then in 2013, the family hit rock bottom.
They tried to open up a couple of businesses that ended up failing.
They were broke and ended up homeless.
She didn't have a place to stay. She really didn't have no money. She didn't have too much of anything, really.
Until it all turned around.
Makiva attended a financial literacy seminar.
She felt like it was a goal to always be financially stable.
She learned about budgeting, business plans, that sort of thing.
She ended up getting up out of that hole that she was in.
But it was Yuri who suggested she take it to the next level.
You're like, why haven't you tried to go be a tutor or be a teacher, teach people about how to start a business?
She opened a consulting firm that helped aspiring entrepreneurs.
Yuri gave her an idea and she ran with it.
She taught them how to become successful, to turn their ideas into a means of taking care of their families and accomplishing their goals.
And she didn't just teach it, she lived it.
She didn't have very much growing up, but because of her dedication and her hard work, she was able to raise herself up into a position to where she was actually making 6 figures a year.
She had moved her family into a beautiful home in a beautiful neighborhood.
It seemed the sky was the limit for Makiva and her family.
She was on her way to being a very wealthy woman.
Her family was growing too. Makiva and Yuri welcomed another daughter in 2016.
She was essentially living the American dream.
But now Makiva and Yuri's American dream has turned into a nightmare.
My sister just got shot in the head.
Makiva's brother and Yuri's friend, Dimitri, both called 911.
Somebody walked up on us with a gun.
She has a hole under her ear the size of a nickel, and you see blood kind of coming out of it.
Can y'all please get here now?
We have several units on the way.
When the police and EMTs arrive, they find Makiva upstairs in the master bedroom.
Yuri is in the room and he's holding Makiva.
He was hysterical, just pleading with her not to die.
They actually have to remove him physically from his wife.
Then as EMTs get to work, there's a sudden glimmer of hope.
All right, let's grab the backboard.
She started coughing, and then I seen her start breathing. And I'm like, fight it, Q, fight it.
"34-year-old Makiva Jenkins and her husband Yuri were living the good life in Palm Beach County, Florida.
They lived in a beautiful neighborhood. They were doing very, very well.
She was what many people would call a rags to riches story.
This was someone who faced many challenges and obstacles in her life, but she didn't let that stop her.
But now EMTs are rushing to save Makiva, the apparent victim of a masked intruder.
She was shot in the head while she was sleeping, and she was barely clinging on to life.
I'm telling her, you can fight it, you're strong, you can do it.
As Makiva is rushed to the hospital, police at the scene are already chasing down their first lead.
Yuri's friend Dimitri Dale told the 911 operator this guy came in, he took my keys, he took the car.
Took my car. If you find the vehicle, there's a possibility the shooter may be close by.
While police put out an APB on Dimitri's stolen car, detectives arrive and take over the investigation.
Detectives started by questioning the 3 witnesses at the scene.
Let's get everybody separated.
Outside, detectives talk to Yuri Jenkins, Dimitri Dale, and Makiva's brother, Marquavius Greer. The interview's especially difficult for Makiva's husband.
I know this is hard, but we need your help to find who did this.
I'll try.
He's trying to keep his composure.
He is inconsolable about what's happening.
But eventually, between Yuri, Dimitri, and Marquavius, detectives are able to piece together what happened.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, Yuri is in his garage hanging out with some friends.
Usually we'll lounge around, play the video games, just chilling, vibing out.
Although that night, Yuri was also giving Makiva's brother a haircut.
That's what he did, hanging out, giving haircuts.
Yuri's friend, Dimitri Dale, showed up a little before 2 a.m.
How's it going, man? Yo, what's up?
I'm thinking like, he probably here just to get a haircut or something.
But Marquavius was still in the chair when the gunman walked into the garage a few minutes later.
He caught them all by surprise.
He went to Dimitri first, threw Dimitri on the ground, came to me, snatched me out the barber chair. And the whole time this going on, I'm laughing. I'm like, okay, this gotta be a joke. You can't be serious.
Oh, you think I'm playing?
Like, okay, you dead serious.
What kind of gun was it? A revolver.
He pushes me to the side, points the gun at Dimitri and tell Dimitri where the keys to the car at.
And you gave me your car keys?
What was I supposed to do, man? The guy had a gun.
People always be talking about how, oh, if I was in that situation, this what I would have did. But man, in any situation like that, you wouldn't know what to do or how to do it.
When you're in that situation, all that you can focus on is that there's a gun pointed at you.
After that, he tells all us to get up, go in the house. So as we're in the house, you got Dimitri, you got me, then behind me is Yuri and the gunman.
He's saying, where's Cuesta? Where's Cuesta?
Cuesta? It's my mom.
At that moment, I'm thinking to myself, like, what the hell?
You want my mom? Where's she at?
My mama must have got into an argument with somebody, tried something with somebody, and made them mad.
I thought that maybe she owed somebody money or something.
But if the gunman was after money, he didn't act like it.
The house wasn't ransacked. They weren't tied up while he rummaged for valuables.
This is a targeted attack.
But who was the gunman's target?
He went looking through the house and ended up in the bedroom where Makiva was sleeping.
I just heard the gunshot. Boom.
Clearly could have been a mistaken identity, not knowing, just saw a female in the bed, so assumed that was Quest.
After that, the intruder fled.
He ran downstairs, and I run into the room, and you see blood. So as I'm seeing that, Yuri told me to call 911.
Call 911! Call 911!
The husband, who's trying to save her life, pressing against the wound.
Wake up.
He was holding her head, trying to make sure she's okay, talking to her like, Kiva, you know, I can't do this without you.
What am I gonna tell our kids?
Kids?
Fortunately, Yuri informed detectives that their children had been staying with his parents and were nowhere near the crime scene.
At the end of the interviews, detectives see no reason to doubt anyone's story.
Everybody's story's consistent as to what happened in the house.
Now all detectives have to do is find the shooter. And it's not long after they finish the interviews that they get their first big break.
Dimitri's stolen car was found less than a mile from Akiva's house.
The person driving didn't go very far with it.
They found the car.
If there's any fingerprints or evidence in the vehicle, it's going to be important to this case.
While CSIs impound the car and begin to process it for forensics, the detectives receive word from the hospital. Makiva has died in surgery.
I really felt like dying myself, and I just blamed myself. You know, I just kind of beat myself up. I should have died in that house with Makiva.
Despite the family's grief, The detectives ask Makiva's mother to come in for a statement the following morning.
Why was this guy asking for Cuesta? We need to find out what's going on.
But there's little she can tell them.
Why would anybody be looking for me?
There's nothing to indicate that this house is where she lives.
You didn't owe anybody any money.
Have any problems with anyone at all?
No, no one.
Instead, Makiva's mother offers up another explanation as to why someone may have targeted her daughter.
She talked about how she was now making 6 figures.
This was all on social media.
She wasn't bragging. She wanted to encourage people.
But did Makiva end up doing the opposite?
People watching these posts could be jealous of her success.
2 motives for murder is jealousy and money.
Detectives investigating the murder of Makiva Jenkins have learned that the 34-year-old business consultant was killed soon after posting online about her financial success.
Makiva had done very well for herself, and she had no problem posting about it.
She talked about how she started with nothing and became successful.
The post was meant to be very encouraging. Basically, she was like, if I can do it, you can do it too.
But now detectives wonder if someone took Makiva's post the wrong way.
Social media always causes a lot of jealousy, especially among friends, because not everybody's able to get out of the old neighborhood and improve their lifestyle.
Police had to consider whether the killer could be a client.
When you look at somebody's business practice, you're looking for some unhappy customers. And in business, there's always going to be 1 or 2 people that are unhappy with your services.
They looked at whether or not she had promised to set up someone's business and it didn't go the way they wanted it to go.
After police interviewed Makiva's mother, they started looking into Makiva's business to find if there were any disgruntled clients that may have had a motive to want to take revenge.
When they look into Makiva Jenkins' financial dealings and her business dealings, they don't really find anything wrong.
But when detectives scroll through Makiva's social media accounts, they do find something interesting.
There was some heated exchanges between Makiva and another woman.
Her name is Courtney Bell.
Courtney was the mother of Yuri's daughter from before Makiva and Yuri met.
She had some very, very negative, nasty things to say about Makiva Jenkins.
Courtney was disparaging and really ridiculing Makiva. It was brutal.
When you post trashing someone who is murdered a very short time later, it's only natural that you're going to become suspect number 1.
From the posts, it appears that Courtney may have had reason to resent Makiva and Yuri's success.
He owed back child support to her over $10,000. And when somebody is owed money, feels like they've been left out, and now somebody posts how well they're doing, that automatically would be a trigger point to set off somebody's anger.
There's one problem with the theory, though.
The police knew for sure that she was not the shooter. As the shooter was a male, she did not fit the description.
That does not mean that she was not involved in some way.
When detectives bring Courtney in for questioning, she doesn't deny making the social media posts.
Courtney was honest about the fact that she does not like Makiva Jenkins.
She's always talking about how much money she's got.
However, that isn't the only reason she resents Makiva.
She is upset about the lack of a relationship between her child and the child's father, Yuri Jenkins.
If it wasn't for her, we'd still be together.
However, Courtney denies any involvement in Makiva's murder.
She said she had absolutely nothing to do with Makiva's death, and she would not want anything bad to happen to her.
The detectives can't be certain, though, and after talking to Courtney, They subpoena her cell phone records.
They want to see who she's spoken to during that time period. Are there messages going back and forth with someone?
Then, while waiting to hear back from Courtney's cell provider, detectives review the requested surveillance footage from Makiva's neighborhood.
The police received surveillance videos from other homes in the area, trying to see where the shooter may have came from. Were they alone?
Video from around the time of the murder shows a black SUV entering the neighborhood.
The black SUV entered the neighborhood roughly around the same time that Dimitri came into the neighborhood. They believe he may have been followed by this vehicle.
What was he doing there? Why was that person there? Did somebody get dropped off? That all of a sudden becomes your new lead.
But after reviewing more footage, the lead goes nowhere.
At some point, the black SUV stops at a different house and eventually it just goes on its way. That leads police to believe that the black SUV had nothing to do with the crime.
However, the SUV isn't all that the cameras caught on tape. The footage records Dimitri driving into the neighborhood in the car the killer would later use for his getaway.
Dimitri Dale's vehicle, moments before it gets to Makiva Jenkins' house, it stops for some reason.
A few seconds later, the detectives have the answer.
There appears to be someone getting out of the passenger side.
Someone is with Dimitri.
The footage is very grainy, so it's really difficult to make out who the person was.
But one thing is crystal clear.
There's something that Dimitri's not telling them.
Detectives investigating Makiva Jenkins' murder have just found video of Dimitri Dale dropping someone off a few doors down from the crime scene.
This mystery person immediately raises alarms.
Dimitri never mentioned that there was someone else with him while he was driving to Yuri and Makiva's house.
However, before bringing Dimitri in for further questioning, detectives received the forensic report on his stolen car.
The shooters described taking the vehicle.
Unfortunately, CSI didn't find any usable prints that could help identify the shooter.
But they don't come away completely empty-handed.
When they searched the car, they found receipts from fast food restaurants.
There were receipts on the day of the murder.
Hoping to learn the identity of Dimitri's passenger, detectives subpoena the security footage from the fast food restaurant.
We're gonna have security cameras, and they're looking to see if they can identify anybody else in the car.
When the police look at the footage from the drive-thru, they notice that there was a gentleman in the car with Dimitri.
One video even shows the man getting out of the car.
It was about 10:30 at night, and you see on camera a black male get out of the vehicle and help push the car out of the drive-thru.
They don't know whether it's broken down or it's out of gas, but there's Dimitri Dale, and there's a mystery individual, roughly 4 hours before the murder of Makiva Jenkins.
Ready to confront Dimitri, detectives bring him to the station for a second But if that's the case, who was the man on the surveillance footage seen exiting his car inside Makiva's neighborhood?
Why is it that Dimitri failed to mention this person's name when he was questioned initially?
They're asking themselves, what motive does Dimitri Dale have to want to end the life of Makiva Jenkins?
After Dimitri's second interview, the detectives bring 21-year-old Jovan Joseph in for questioning.
They want to talk to him and find out exactly what he knows and precisely what is his involvement here.
Jovan says, yeah, I was over there earlier.
Dude told me he cut hair.
Yuri?
Yeah, that's his name.
Jovan was a relative unknown. He appeared to be a stranger to Makiva Jenkins.
He also confirms that Dimitri gave him a ride home around 10 o'clock.
He actually has an alibi. He said that he was at the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning visiting a friend.
He tells them that was what I was doing at the time of Makiva Jenkins's murder.
But when detectives follow up with the hospital, his alibi isn't so airtight.
There is a record of Jovan Joseph visiting a friend at the hospital.
However, according to the visitor log, he signed in at 3 o'clock that morning, not 2.
This is about an hour after the murder had occurred.
He's lying, and the question remains, where was he?
Police begin to suspect that there's more to the story with Dimitri and Jovan.
Looking for some answers, the detectives ask Makiva's brother, Marquavius, to also come back in for another interview.
Now, what can you tell us about Jovan Joseph?
Not much, really.
Way says, I don't know Jovan, but he was at the home earlier that day.
Dimitri had a friend that came over, ended up getting a hot top fade.
There's something funny about it, though, something I've been thinking about.
They were talking amongst each other, Yuri, Dimitri, and Jovan. I'm in the garage playing the game, and I just see them all huddled up.
When they were leaving, Dimitri and the other dude went out to the car.
Yuri was leaned over in the window and was talking to them. And Quay said that he was talking to them for about half an hour.
So I get up. I go over there where they at to try to at least tune in or see what they talking about, put my little 2 cents in.
Makiva's brother says an awkward silence followed.
Everything just went quiet when I got around. Nothing was said, everybody just looking at each other.
What were they talking about?
I don't know.
Before I walked up, they were just having a full-blown conversation.
Is there some type of plan being hatched?
Makiva Jenkins' brother has revealed to investigators that hours before she was murdered, her husband Yuri may have been plotting something with his friend Dimitri Dale and a man named Jovan Joseph.
Jovan was the man that police suspected may have been Makiva's killer.
Jovan, Dimitri, and Yuri were talking by Dimitri's car for about 20 to 30 minutes.
A few hours later, Makiva was dead.
So now the situation goes from random to personal.
Police start looking deeper into the relationship between Yuri and Makiva.
From all appearances, this was a couple that was thriving together and growing together.
But when detectives get a call from Makiva's friend, Natasha Williams, a different picture of the couple's relationship starts to emerge.
They start to see that there were some issues in the relationship.
Makiva had confided in Natasha that Yuri had cheated on her with different women.
Natasha Williams said he had been cheating on her for years.
Until, according to Natasha, Makiva finally had enough.
She started distancing herself from her husband emotionally. She started holding back from him financially.
She wants out of the relationship. She was planning on getting a divorce.
Could that be the motive behind her murder?
Makiva was the breadwinner in this marriage. She had a lucrative business. So if Makiva were to divorce Yuri, that gravy train would go dry.
Everything that you've known for the last 6 years of your life is now being threatened.
According to Natasha, that may not have been Yuri's only motive to murder Makiva.
She was pregnant with another child.
Makiva, a mother of 3, about to become a mother of 4.
Natasha said that the pregnancy had put Makiva's divorce plans on hold.
The fact that she wanted a divorce but decided to stay with her husband because they were expecting another child was a testament to how important she thought family was and how much she was willing to endure for the sake of trying to keep her family together.
But Natasha says Yuri didn't see things the same way.
When Yuri found out that Makiva was expecting again, he was not happy about that.
If she had the baby and then they ended up getting a divorce, he would have to pay more in child support.
He was already struggling to pay child support to Courtney's baby.
I didn't know. I don't even think my grandmom or my mom knew. I definitely didn't know until after the fact. I'm like, oh, whoever did this, man, they really just gotta pay.
This young woman who is carrying this developing life in her body, and she's fighting for life for over 3 hours in the hospital after being shot in the head and tragically losing her. That is extremely difficult because you lose her and you lose that child. That is a tremendous loss for her family.
There's a loss of so much potential life, potential future. And when the death happens before a baby is born or when a child is very young, that feeling is even greater.
Being a veteran homicide detective, that's the worst feeling in the world. You have an unborn baby that had nothing to do with anything, and now is an innocent victim. It motivates you to get even closer to find out who would shoot a pregnant female and take the life of an unborn baby.
But does that mean Yuri was behind the murder? When the detectives dig deeper into the couple's financials, they find yet another reason Yuri might have wanted Makiva dead.
Police discover that there was a $500,000 life insurance policy that Makiva Jenkins had taken out. $500,000 can be a pretty good motive for someone to commit a crime.
Hoping to confirm Yuri was after a big payday, detectives reach out to the insurance company.
When police actually looked into the policy, they found out that Makiva had changed the beneficiary information and made her grandmother the beneficiary.
Yuri thought that this $500,000 policy had him as a beneficiary.
He contacted the company about getting his money, and he was shocked when they told him that he's not the beneficiary.
When he's told he's not the beneficiary, he says, wow. And then he asks who the beneficiary was.
They told him, we can't reveal that information. And his response was, there's no way she could have changed it in time.
That's not a normal reaction for somebody calling about a beneficiary on a life insurance policy. That's a confession.
Now convinced that Yuri was behind Makiva's murder, detectives still need more evidence to file formal charges against him.
The detectives subpoenaed cell phone records from both Yuri Jenkins and Jovan Joseph, hoping to tie them together.
According to the phone records, there was no direct contact between Yuri and the suspected shooter.
That didn't mean Yuri and Jovan wasn't in communication in some kind of way.
The phone records showed that there was just constant communication between Yuri and Dimitri and Jovan.
Based on the records, detectives figured that Dimitri acted as the go-between.
The records also reveal that Yuri isn't exactly a grieving widower.
4 days after the murder of his wife, Yuri had text messages between him and Courtney, his baby's mother, already talking about how good the sex was between the two of them. His wife had just been murdered, and he's already talking about sex.
When detectives turned to Jovan's phone records, they put him at the scene of the crime.
Cell phone records show that his cell phone pinged from a tower a half mile from the Jenkinses' home shortly before the murder.
Jovan says he was at the hospital at the time of the murder. There was no way he could have been at the hospital when his cell phone was pinging at the location where the victim was.
Jovan Joseph could very well have been the shooter.
Figuring Dimitri is the key to connecting Jovan to Yuri, detectives bring him in for another round of questioning.
We're going to talk about some stuff. I need you to be honest, because I don't hide anything. It's just going to hurt you.
Yeah, I don't have the reason to.
You don't confront him. When you confront him, then he can say, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
I want you to clarify that this is you sending the messages to Jovan, or back and forth with Jovan, and then you can explain what you mean by these things.
Once Dimitri finds out that the police are on to the fact that he knows more than he led up to, he realizes that there's no more room to tell lies.
It's not that I was trying to cover for them, I just didn't want to say nothing.
You said you did.
I just didn't want to say nothing, so if that's covering...
You did cover for them, man.
I did lie.
He told the police that Yuri talked to him about wanting to have someone killed.
And I was just saying, listen, man, I don't want nothing to do with this. You need to watch who you talk to, because, people can go and they saying you running your mouth, this and that, but he kept pressing.
And so he put Yuri in touch with Jovan.
Although that was all Dimitri claimed to have done.
He initially said that he didn't know what happened between them or what they'd arranged.
But the detective keeps pushing.
You let him keep talking. You let him keep changing the story, because every time you change the story, you can go back and say, oh, by the way, you forgot to tell me about this.
I didn't hear that.
Eventually, Dimitri admits Yuri had paid Jovan to kill Makiva.
When I talked to Jovan, he told me the truth. He said, your boy offered me $1,500.
He also admitted that he gave Jovan a ride to the house on the night of the murder.
This confirmed their theory that Jovan was the man seen getting out of Dimitri's car in the Jenkins neighborhood just moments before the shooting.
Do you know that the state attorney's office prosecutor still can charge you as an accessory, okay, or conspiracy to commit murder on the surface, but I wanted to use you as a witness, okay?
Mm-hmm. He's caught and he knows he's going down and he's trying to cut a deal.
He actually starts cooperating with the police. He began to wear a wire every time he had conversations with Yuri.
In these recorded conversations, Dimitri tells Yuri something to the effect of Jovan Joseph was really eager to get the rest of the money that he said Yuri promised him.
That's not all Dimitri tells him either.
He told him Jovan was talking to the police.
Yuri's response to that was to tell Dimitri to tell Jovan to shut up.
He's like, hey, shut all that down.
Detectives in Palm Beach County, Florida, have convinced Yuri Jenkins' friend, Dimitri Dale, to secretly record their phone conversations.
They was hoping to catch Yuri making admissions about his wife, Makiva's murder.
But Yuri plays it cool.
He shuts Dimitri down and told him to stop talking and don't say anything else.
So the detectives try a different approach and take Jovan Joseph, their third suspected conspirator, into custody.
This is a very unfortunate time in your life, but you also don't want to be the only one taking the fall.
Taking the fall for what, bro? I still...
At first, Jovan denied all of these allegations.
I didn't shoot this lady. I didn't do nothing.
You're gonna let Yuri just walk away?
Instead, he claims Yuri and Dimitri are trying to frame him.
And those are two guys you guys should really be looking at, you feel me?
They're interrogating him, and it just seems like one stream of lies after the other, and nothing about his story is checking out.
Feeling the heat, Jovan keeps trying to talk his way out.
Javon Joseph is slowly becoming more forthcoming with police. One of the things he tells them is that he needed money.
My mom's getting kicked out of her house. We don't even have the money to freaking move. We don't even have money to move, bro.
Javon kept talking and talking.
He even admits that Yuri showed him a gun once.
Why all of a sudden would he just show you a gun to?
He started bragging, bragging.
What exactly did he say?
Oh, you feel me? If somebody come test me or whatever, I got this. A lot of people do that. Feel me? That's not the first person that ever did that.
But eventually he starts giving them bits and pieces of information.
Javon was caught. His only option to save his skin was to point the finger at Yuri Jenkins.
Backed into a corner, Jovan finally admits his role in the murder.
I was really just trying to help him out, but really, to be honest.
His confession gives detectives more than enough evidence to take Yuri into custody.
With the testimony of his best friend and the trigger man, they had what they needed.
You should be charged with first-degree murder. McHugh.
What?
Yuri denies being involved in the murder of his wife.
Man, I would not kill my wife, man.
Well, of course you wouldn't, but you had somebody do it.
He's defiant. He doesn't realize he's been taped. He doesn't realize that everybody turned on him.
But he soon will.
People roll. I'm just gonna be straight out with you.
People roll? What do you mean people roll?
Javon, Dimitri.
Rolled up on and did what?
They gave up information.
What kind of information?
Well, the fact that you contracted Javon to do this.
Trapped, Yuri turns on Dimitri, insisting this friend can't be trusted.
He put together a robbery to rob the youth pastor at our church a few years back. He's done so much little stuff, and it's like I'm always there to help him, to pull him out of the hole he digs himself in, and then now he freaking tries to drag me in this shit?
Yuri even suggested that Dimitri came up with the whole thing in order to rob him and Makiva.
He probably thought that we had something in the house, maybe cash.
Yuri never admitted to anything that would implicate him in the murder of his wife.
But thanks to Dimitri and Jovan's statements, detectives are able to charge him with first-degree murder. News of Yuri's arrest comes as a shock to Makiva's family.
I had so much love for Yuri that I didn't want to believe that he actually did that.
It never even dawned on me that it was him.
When the case goes to trial in May of 2022, Yuri is the only defendant that stands before the judge.
The prosecution cut deals with Dimitri Dale and Javon Joseph to testify against Yuri Jenkins.
Javon Joseph was actually the trigger man, but he ended up getting a second-degree manslaughter charge with no more than 20 years.
Dimitri was given a probationary sentence of 15 years for manslaughter.
According to the prosecution's star witnesses, Yuri's motive was money.
Makiva was doing very well. She accomplished her dream, and she was going to take him with her. Before he cheated on her, he could have just walked away, but instead he paid those guys to kill her with her money. He had her killed, thinking he was going to live in a big house with an insurance policy.
There was a policy of $500,000 that Yuri Jenkins thought was coming to him.
He wanted everything, the house, the car. He wanted it all.
So he started working on a plan.
He went to his closest friend, Dimitri.
They wanted to throw police off the scent. They wanted to make it seem as if this was some random act.
Which is where Jovan Joseph came in.
Jovan was just some kid that Dimitri knew. There was nothing tying him to Yuri and Makiva.
Everybody was hoping that they get a piece of that insurance policy that he was going to get after she died.
But first, they'd have to get away with it. And Yuri had a plan for that too.
Yuri Jenkins bringing Marquavius there was part of his plan to throw police off the trail.
He was real smart to have the brother there the brother's reaction took the suspicion off everybody there.
They plotted all this up under me, under my nose, played me like a fool.
Their plan unfolding perfectly. Jovan went upstairs, pretending that he was looking for Makiva's mother.
They wanted the whole angle involving the mother, the focus, instead of this plan for Yuri Jenkins to get this money.
Then he finally slipped into the bedroom and shot Makiva in her sleep.
During the trial, when they asked Jovan, why'd you shoot her in the head, his reaction was to finish the job.
The only silver lining in this is that she was sleeping. She didn't even see it coming.
The defense.
It was immediately evident to me that this was a blunt force trauma death.
He has injuries to his back, obvious bloody injury to the back of his head. There's quite a bit of blood on the bed, blood spattered on the wall, on the side of the bed, and of course on the floor where he had been laying.
From the evidence at the crime scene, investigators start to understand how the murder unfolded.
A crime of this nature typically is a very personal thing. It wasn't, somebody walked in and shot him and turned around and left. This was an up-close and personal, very violent, very angry attack.
Officers start processing the scene and collecting evidence.
Law enforcement, of course, photographed the scene, took an inventory of what was in the bedroom and elsewhere in the house. They were looking for what would have been our murder weapon. They were pretty clearly looking for some sort of long, blunt object like a bat.
The scene yielded very little helpful evidence. There was no fingerprints. I don't think they located footprints. They looked for tire impressions. I don't think they found any of that.
The officers that were on scene that afternoon through the night into the next day had blocked off the portion of gravel road where this residence was at. One of the news crews that had come out the afternoon of the homicide camped out in their vehicle. So in the morning, one of the news crew decided to walk up to the residence. During his walk up there, he located a bat laying on the side of the road. That was ultimately identified as the murder weapon.
Police appeal for information and start canvassing the area.
So there was a local farmer in the area. He had traveled down that road going towards West Liberty at about 9 o'clock in the morning and didn't see any bat on the roadway. He did tell us that when he went back down the road at about 1 p.m., that he noted that there was a bat that was present by the side of the road.
Based on the fact that he sees the bat on the road later in the day, but knows that it's not there earlier in the day, we were able to establish that the murder would have happened somewhere between 10 a.m. and about 1 to 1:30 p.m. that day.
The victim, 22-year-old Corey Winicky, is well known in the small community.
Corey went to school in West Liberty, played football in high school, got out of high school and did what every late teen or late 20-year-old does. Kind of led that party lifestyle.
He worked at Wink's Bar. It was essentially the family-run business in West Liberty. Corey was a young man and enjoyed being in the bar. He enjoyed the bar environment. He enjoyed drinking in the bar and socializing with people.
He was a likable type of guy. I think people knew him. He knew them. It was a bar where he called you by your name. He knew your name and everyone knew him. I think he was a friendly person. I think that he did a lot of things that young people did at the time. He played on softball team. Pretty normal kid.
Corey also has a reputation as a party boy, and despite being engaged to Jody Holtz, has a playboy image too.
A lot of the stuff that I read from the initial interview indicated that he was involved in drugs. He was involved with a lot of different women, and some of these women even knew about each other, but some of them didn't. He was a pretty free spirit, the way I got it.
Corey and Jody were kind of like high school sweethearts that had been engaged and they were planning on getting married. They shared a small home in West Liberty and were kind of moving forward into those next phases of their relationship, planning on getting married and things like that.
Jody thought that Corey was going to turn things around, and maybe marriage would have helped him. Maybe marriage would have slowed him down.
Unfortunately for detectives, the forensic evidence from the crime scene yields no leads.
Well, it was 1992, and forensic science not even close to being what it is today. So we were fairly limited in what we could do forensically at that point in time. The bat was collected by the State Police Crime Lab. It was taken there for testing.
They used an investigative technique which would still be in use today, and that is put the bat in a chamber and fill it with superglue fumes. The superglue will stick to everything on the bat, and in the process it sticks to the fingerprint. As it turned out, there were not any usable fingerprints recovered on the bat.
The extent of the expertise of their blood testing at that point in time was they could determine a blood type. So they determined that the blood type that was present on the bat would have belonged to the victim, Corey.
Corey's Casanova lifestyle is adding a layer of complexity to the investigation.
To commit a blunt force trauma killing, someone's obviously very, very upset with that individual. So we knew that there had been some type of event that probably happened very recently that led up to what happened here. So that's what we began to dig for also.
You have to start with a small circle around the victim. So you usually start with the spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, and then you work out. With Corey, it was a little bit more difficult because he had more than one relationship going on. Some of these women that he was having sex with had boyfriends, had husbands. That made it a bit harder than normal. Corey was a strong young man, and for that type of crime to have committed, I think it had a lot of people scratching their heads asking, for one, who could have done this, and for two, how could they have pulled it off, because it did not appear that Corey had fought back.
October 1992. The West Liberty Police Department in Iowa is investigating the murder of 22-year-old Corey Winnicky, who was beaten to death with a blunt object inside his home.
You were dealing with someone that had contact with thousands of people per week. And so early on, the talk was this in connection with some type of sexual relationship? Was this in connection with illegal drugs? Was this in connection with gambling? Was this in connection with an altercation that had possibly taken place at the bar and someone was upset? So there was a lot of different facets and a lot of different angles to look at, and we ended up talking to a tremendous number of people.
Corey's fiancée, Jody Holtz, is ruled out as a suspect when colleagues confirm she was at work all day. But through interviews with Corey's friends and colleagues, detectives quickly develop a person of interest, Annette Hazen.
She would have been talked to because of the fact that she was a bar patron. She would have been talked to because of the fact that she was a bar employee. And she would have been talked to because of the fact that very early on we learned that she had had a sexual relationship with Corey. And we didn't have to search her out at that point because she showed up at the police station.
Annette shows up with her sister-in-law, Jackie Hazen, at the police department and volunteers that she had seen Corey at the bar the night before. She actually puts herself at the house, at the farmhouse, later that morning, saying that they stopped, she and Jackie stopped on the way to Iowa City while they were running errands, but claims that she has no knowledge of what would have happened.
It did seem a little strange that she come up with all this stuff and that she wanted to to present it willingly. But then I also kind of got the feeling that she was doing that because she was afraid. She really didn't want to sit down in front of cops. She didn't really want, she was afraid of something, them finding something out.
Police begin to reconstruct events on the night leading up to Corey's murder.
From the interviews that were conducted, we learned that at bar closing time, the night before the homicide took place, that Annette had left the bar at a certain point in time prior to closing, that Annette was extremely intoxicated, that Annette was probably also using drugs that night.
Not only is Annette seeing her relationship with Corey slipping away, but that night she also comes across a love rival entering the bar.
By all witness statements, Corey basically was treating Annette very poorly, was basically trying to find a way to end their relationship. Then it got worse for Annette because Wendy shows up and Corey basically picks Wendy over Annette. So Annette gets so mad that instead of leaving the bar, she waits for Corey out in his car for when the bar closes.
Corey and this other female left the bar. Annette's still in the car. They are going to drive Annette home.
All three of them were traveling down the road to take Annette home. Annette wasn't happy about that. Annette didn't want Wendy to be in the car, so Annette tried to jump out of the car as it was traveling down the roadway. And Corey and Annette had exited the vehicle and had an argument, a screaming match. And eventually Annette got back inside the vehicle and Corey took her home.
Corey then took this other woman home and then went back to Annette's house where they slept together, kind of made up after their fight, and then Corey left and presumably went back to his house.
If she loved Corey, she wants to fix it. She wants him to break it off with everyone else and be with Corey. She couldn't have expected too much. She had to know he was engaged. So what could she expect from a guy like that?
Detectives question Annette about her movements after she last saw Corey.
Annette's timeline that morning was very interesting and made little sense. She says she sleeps for a couple hours and then gets woken up by her sister and gets taken to go do a roofing job in a nearby town. She's never been a roofer before, never been a roofer since. She's ripping off shingles for about an hour and a half when her sister comes back and picks her up because her sister has to go to a doctor's appointment in Iowa City.
She also related to us that she was going to stop by Corey's residence on the way to Iowa City, and that she did that, and that she had knocked on the door and there was no answer at the door, that her and Jackie continued on to Iowa City, stopped at different various places, made some small purchases, and that she would have the receipts for those purchases.
In her interviews, she also says then later that day, after they finish their errands in Iowa City, they come back from Iowa City to West Liberty, drive past Corey's house on a parallel road about a mile away, don't stop, but then stop in town and call back to the house on the payphone to try to talk to him, but he doesn't answer, and then she says that they went home. That also doesn't make any sense.
Detectives start focusing on Annette Hazen as her testimony becomes increasingly suspicious.
There's always red flags, but the big giant red flags, the ones that are on top of the building screaming at you that this is the person, is when your suspect starts coming forward providing alternate suspects. She started coming in and saying, well, Corey was being threatened by this guy, or Corey was being threatened by this guy. She starts providing all these different leads for police to follow up on, hoping to take them off her trail.
The next move for detectives is taking a closer look at Annette's relationship with co-worker and part-time lover, Corey Winnicky.
Annette meets Corey when he's a teenager working at the bar, and she's 7 years older. So she's in her early mid-20s, and he is in his late teens. They, as far as we know, had a sexual relationship.
Annette was living day to day, going to work when you needed money, going out at night, partying, trying to still live that lifestyle that Corey's living.
She was unusually interested in the investigation. She would come to the police station of her own volition and check on things. She had made statements that had placed herself at the scene of the crime during the period of time that we knew the crime occurred. So she was being looked at hard, and eventually she was asked to take a polygraph test. They set up another date for her to come in, and she took the polygraph examination on that day and basically passed the polygraph. There was no conclusive evidence that they could say after she took that polygraph that would lead you to believe that she was guilty.
Unfortunately, when she took the polygraph and passed it, the law enforcement investigators, they worked other leads and went on to other things. The investigation just petered out at that point.
Over time, with no new leads to pursue, the case goes cold.
After the initial investigation of the case was not solved. No arrest had been made. It's an open homicide case, and it was routine for us to reopen these things and look at them.
They would get pulled out if new information came in. If things were quiet, we'd pull them out and look at them.
We interviewed some people, the DCI and I, that really didn't give us a whole lot. We were getting the same names, the same information, nothing that could link Corey to, drug use. Nothing came, back to us that someone was so jealous that they'd want to hurt him. And it just went cold.
The case remains cold for 25 years until detectives receive an unexpected and unrelated tip-off that potentially reignites the case.
Agent Valletta had gone to the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics on a completely different matter and was waiting to see the individual that he wanted to talk to. Happened to have a conversation with Jessie, who was working at the hospital, and she started to ask him questions about cold cases.
So Jessie Becker, she's a nurse there. She was the nurse in charge of the floor, and she came and kind of aggressively asked me what I was doing there and basically told me I needed to leave. That's when I told her I was with DCI and that I was there to interview the guy that had been stabbed.
Jessie, for whatever reason, at that moment decided to ask Trent if he knew anybody who worked on cold cases, old murders.
And I'm like, well, actually, I'm probably one of two in the state that actually does them. And she said, and I said, well, why is that? And she said, well, because I know who killed someone back in Muscatine County a few years ago. She told me that Annette Hazen had killed Corey Winnicky.
In 2017, 25 years after the unsolved murder of Corey Winnicky, detectives receive information that could finally reopen the case.
That encounter with Agent Valletta and Jessie Becker was the catalyst that got this case going again.
It's a 1 in a million chance that he goes to this hospital, meets this person that tells him about this case that is more than 25 years old at that point in time, that he confirms that the crime took place and that all the details essentially match.
To set the scene, Jessie is at the time of this murder, a 9-year-old girl living in West Liberty. She is friends with Jackie Hazen's daughter. So Jesse and her friend are sleeping over at Jackie Hazen's house, where Annette stays, where Annette lives also.
Jesse said they were staying upstairs. They were sneaking down the steps to go to the refrigerator to grab something. And she kind of smiled and said, I'm not sure what it was, if it was something we were supposed to have or weren't. But we're sneaking down the steps. And as we get to the bottom, Annette Hazen is at the table.
What Jesse sees is Annette has lit a number of black candles and is crying and talking to herself. What Jesse hears Annette say to herself, not knowing that these girls are there, Corey, I'm sorry I hurt you. Corey, I never meant to kill you. Corey, I love you.
She's scared. She goes back upstairs and tells the girls that she's with. Ultimately, that's discounted. She goes home and tells her mom what she saw. And that's where it stopped.
The mother was in a very complicated situation romantically, and had a fear that there would be some retribution that would not be good, maybe for Jesse or maybe for herself, and chose not to say anything at that point.
With this new lead, officers reopen the case.
There's a lot of work to be done then. You can't just take a confession and charge someone with it. You have to corroborate facts within the confession. You have to, there has to be more. So what I did is I started a little background check on Jesse, and then I started reading the case file, the Corey Winnicky homicide case file.
One of the things that I thought was very important in hearing Jesse's story and realizing Jesse is what you would call a dream witness. Army Reserve, master's degree. She's in a position of enormous responsibility, but she's a 9-year-old girl when she hears and sees this. And so it was important to me to know, what do we have that we can do to corroborate her information? And so I asked the investigators, did she tell her mom? So they did some follow-up. They go interview Jesse's mom, and Jesse's mom corroborates everything. Jesse comes home from that sleepover and tells her mom what she saw, and it relates the same thing about the black candles and Annette's statement to her mom. So that was enormously important corroboration for us.
Investigators need to corroborate Jesse's story further if they want to use it as evidence.
I'm concerned because memories change over a long period of time. I didn't think that maybe she was being dishonest, but I was concerned that the memories from something that happened to you when you're 9 years old and now you're almost 40 or so, I had concerns about that. I would want something to corroborate what she remembered.
I think it would be hard to remember something like that so many years later. I don't doubt that it was a disturbing event that she saw. It would be hard to see an adult having very strong emotions like that and trying to make sense of that as a young person.
We wanted to verify that what Jessie said she saw, she had the ability to see. We had her draw the area, the vantage point from the steps into the dining room. So when I went to photograph the house, that area was photographed from different vantage points and verified that, yeah, she could see what she saw.
People often make a big deal about little kids and their memories. And I don't know if that's fair, because when something tragic happens to you, it gets burned into your mind. Jessie Becker never heard anybody else say that they killed someone before. I bet she relived that night over and over and over again. That's why her drawing was so good. That's why her recollection of everything that happened was so good.
At this stage, officers believe they have enough and bring their original suspect, Annette Hazen, now Annette Cahill, back in for questioning.
She came in, she played her part. She acted like a grandmother. She acted very concerned about resolving the case. She wanted to be helpful. But, as with most criminal cases, she was only helpful up to the point where she started feeling like a suspect.
Off and on, back and forth.
Your relationship?
Yes.
Romantic, you're saying?
Yes.
And that was cooperative/uncooperative. Yes, she could meet with them. Well, maybe not today, maybe a different day. Maybe I have something going on so I can meet with you for a very limited period of time. And when people start putting those type of roadblocks in your way, they're trying to take control of the situation. And that's certainly what she was doing with them.
Once the time's up, she leaves and says she'll come back in and do another interview. Well, then she makes up just a crazy story that an old friend of hers from high school showed up and now she's got to go out for dinner. She can't meet us again. And then she leaves. She leaves the state for a couple weeks and doesn't come back. So her level of cooperation with us disappears within 40 minutes of the first interview.
I think one of the big things that came from those interviews that had never come up in any prior interviews was Annette told us that was the first time that Corey told her that he loved her.
We argued, got back in the car, took that girl, whoever she was, she had a child by Corey, dropped her off somewhere, drove back to the farm, and we had sex that night. I think it was angry sex. And I don't even know if I've ever mentioned this before. That was the very first night Corey ever told me he loved me.
Why is this the first time we're hearing about this? Why didn't this come up in any of the other dozen interviews that were conducted over the years? That was a big thing for us.
She gave Corey an ultimatum, and he chose her. He chose her over Jody, and so she would have no reason whatsoever to kill him because that was the first time Corey told her he loved her. So things could not be any better.
We had talked about skipping town. In fact, the following Monday, a week after he died, we were supposed to go to, or following Saturday, we were supposed to go to Branson to look at bars for sale. I loved Corey dearly. I really did. I didn't think it was going to last, to be perfectly honest. He was so much younger than me, and he slept with anything that walked through the door. It was not, he wasn't for one person.
In her mind, they were going to have this running away together scenario. They were going to leave kind of the difficulties of life in West Liberty and the things that they were dealing with there, and they were going to start a new life together. And it sounded like a fantasy.
Those were not Corey's plans. And when we talked to other people, associates of Corey's, they would just kind of laugh about that, because basically the only person in the world that believes that scenario is going to take place is Annette.
I think that argument the night before, I think the dropping her off at home and leaving with this other woman pushed her over the edge.
They wondered what Corey could have done to pick somebody off so bad that they killed him. You don't do anything to deserve this. Go knock the out of somebody if you're that mad. You don't do this. But yeah, still mad.
She basically says, look, Corey deserved to get beat badly, but he didn't deserve to die. Now, you would have to ask yourself, why would someone who's being accused of beating someone to death say he deserved to be beaten? he didn't deserve to die. It's almost, we call it a cold case confession, for lack of better terms, because she's admitting to exactly what she did without saying she did it.
Investigators receive a warrant for Annette's arrest.
I had walked up to the house, knocked on the door, was able to handcuff her without incident. Told her that she was under arrest and she was being charged with murder.
She was very stoic, just sat in the back and didn't say anything. You would hope that she'd be screaming in the back saying that we got the wrong person, but it seemed to us like she knew what was coming.
I thought it was a righteous charge and a worthy fight, and it was time to bring her to justice.
May 2018. The West Liberty Police Department in Iowa have just arrested Annette Cahill for the 1992 murder of her lover, Corey Winnicky.
I charged Annette with murder in the first degree, which is a Class A felony punishable by life without the possibility of parole. It includes with it lesser degrees of murder and manslaughter automatically in that charge. So it was the charge I thought was appropriate.
We're trying to solve a crime from the early 90s. Annette has aged. She had a career, she had a family, by all rights had been leading a normal life. We're trying to go back and deal with 1992 Annette. So that was a hurdle that we had to cross.
We're talking about somebody who was an alcohol and drug-fueled, angry, uncontrolled individual in 1992, and by the time you go to trial, you have a mother and a grandmother sitting there.
One of the challenges of this prosecution, really in jury selection, was she does not look like a killer. She looks like a grandmother. 26 years have passed her by. She does not look like somebody who would come into a person's house with a bat and crush their skull. So the challenge of getting jurors to see the Annette that existed in 1992 was a big one.
The prosecution presented a very aggressive case about Annette being a very jealous and emotional and fiery individual who wanted Corey for herself and couldn't not only see him with someone else, but couldn't see him without her. When Jessie was describing that she had seen Annette with burning black candles and pacing the room and being very emotional and saying, "I'm sorry, Corey, I'm sorry I killed you," it seemed very high drama. I mean, black candles, kind of like, what are we talking about here? Are they kind of mystical in a way? Are they spiritual in a way? That was a very, very vivid detail. I could picture that in my head. I could picture that entire scene of what that looked like. And it seemed very dramatic.
The jury leave the courtroom to deliberate, but cannot reach a verdict.
The first trial ended in a mistrial. We were confident that we laid everything out the best we could. We were confident that we had the facts and we were going to get a verdict in our favor. Ultimately, at the end of the day, came back with a hung jury.
I was gutted. From our perspective, we've worked so hard to do the investigation, to build it all up, and then for me as a prosecutor, it is really a very hard thing to go through a trial of that length, of that intensity, and then it ends with a hung jury, and you find out that the jury really did not resonate to your case theory and wanted a lot more. That was a low moment.
Myself and the investigators that eventually solved this case at the end, we were all present when we got the verdict, the hung jury. Everyone gets up, leaves the room, and we're left standing, and everyone looked around and they said, "Let's get this stuff cleaned up and we'll meet in a half hour at the county attorney's office and talk about the next trial."
While investigators are searching for new evidence for the second trial, they learn of another witness, Scott Payne, who knew Annette at the time of Corey's murder.
He'd been heavily involved in alcohol abuse and drug abuse. He'd been interviewed early in the investigation, indicated that he wasn't cooperative with the police when they talked to him back in 1992 because he didn't like the police and he'd never be cooperative with the police.
Through happenstance, through Scott Payne's mother talking to Corey Winnicke's mother, we learned that Scott Payne was surprised that he had been not called to testify as a witness. I open up the report on my computer and I search for the name and I find him and I think, why would we have called this witness? Well, the investigators go out and interview him again and we realize that now that he's sober, he's a much, much better witness and had some important information to give us.
So Scott Payne was a drug user at the time who was going out to Annette's house to use drugs with other men that would go there. One day that he was there, he thought it was around the time that Corey Winnicke dies. He sees Annette and Jackie pull up in Jackie's car with a bag of bloody clothes, which they begin to burn.
He said there was blood on it. At that point, he had worked at a meatpacking facility, so he knew what bloody clothes looked like.
Obviously, that shows her connection with this murder. It shows her guilty conscience, and was a very important piece of evidence that corroborated what Jesse Becker told us.
In September 2019, the second trial of Annette Cahill starts in the Muscatine County District Court.
Throughout the trial, she was very reserved, unemotional almost. There were a few times where you could tell that she was feeling something. So at some points, I saw her tear up a little bit, depending on what the testimony was. But for the most part, she was very reserved.
The testimony provided at trial was certainly damaging to Annette, but you're relying on memories from witnesses from 30 years ago or so. And had there been some evidence, like a fingerprint or DNA or something else that tied her to the crime, I would be all for it. But there was none of that ever presented or even discovered. I think based on what the jury had, I could see him going with second-degree murder. I think that's adequate for a person her age. That's pretty much a life sentence.
The jury was smart. They probably believed what I believed. They probably believed that Annette went over there with the intention to seriously assault Corey, and that led to his death, which is second-degree murder. So I think they took their time, they reviewed the evidence, and I think they got it correct.
I think there was a degree of relief once the trial was over, not only with the family, but the community as a whole. I've talked to a handful of people over the last couple of years since the trial's over and the sentencing is done, that they'll come up and say, yeah, we knew Annette did it.
The motive for this was jealousy and anger. Jealousy at Wendy replacing Annette. Anger that this trip to Branson, this new reality, was not going to happen. It's a classic and old motive for killing. I think it was premeditated in the sense that Annette went into that house intending to cause Corey Winnicke grave bodily harm.
It only takes one good hit to the head and you're defenseless. And Corey didn't fight back. He was still in his underwear.
She was a very jealous, angry individual that, ended up turning to violence to try and solve her problem, and it resulted in a homicide.
The West Liberty Police Department can now finally close the file on the 1992 murder.
Well, I call this situation a case of the investigators of old and the investigators of new. And certainly to me, the investigators of old are the people that caught this case in 1992, that worked it from its inception. I'm one of those individuals. When Agent Valletta and Sheriff Reese and other people became involved in the most recent aspect of this investigation, trust me, they're my heroes. They solved this case.
Sometimes it's nice to get lucky in a case. And we've never had a better witness than Jesse Becker, but it was complete luck that it happened. It wasn't great investigative work, or new DNA findings. It was a bump in time where two people connected and she happened to talk to the right person.
We fight for the victims. That's what we do. It's painful to have something open as long as this was open. Here's how you carry around uncertainty in a small town. You know that every day when you walk down the sidewalk, that the person that you're meeting on the sidewalk might be the person that committed homicide on your son, because they don't know who it is. So I think it's a great, great relief when you hear that there's been an arrest in that case and that you don't have that feeling of uncertainty anymore. And hopefully you can move towards closure.
The answers are always there if we know where to look. The answers are always there. The answers are, if you ask the right questions to the right person and you can pick up on it and you can read it, the answer is always there. You may not always have the physical proof, but the answer will be there.
Dallas, Texas. Police are called to a garage in a high-end apartment complex. A body has been found.
She had no warning that this was coming.
The bullet entered in the back of her skull and actually came out underneath her chin area.
But the profile of the victim and the manner of death lead investigators to believe that this is more than a random shooting.
I felt like there was more to the story. There was no random circumstance that caused this murder, that they were there for a specific reason and they were waiting on our victim.
What detectives soon uncover is a complex conspiracy.
Just the lengths that someone would go to try to get back with an ex-boyfriend.
I don't think she even thought about covering her tracks. It was all about getting this done. This focus of, I need to get Kendra Hatcher out of the way so I can get Ricky back.
Unfortunately, there are people in this world who would kill another human being and not give it a second thought.
This is the story of the tragic murder of Kendra Hatcher, the detailed and methodical search for her killer, and a motive which police soon learn was triggered by jealousy and rage. It's just after 8 p.m. on the evening of September 2nd, 2015. Police respond to a 911 call from a luxurious high-rise apartment building in Dallas's Uptown.
Dallas 911, where's emergency?
Hi, someone just got shot in the parking lot of the Gables Park 17. All I heard was screaming and then a loud pop, and then I saw her laying on the floor and it was like blood coming out of her neck. The people, they had a mask on, and I think it was a black Jeep Cherokee.
I responded to that and was told by the officers that were securing the scene outside that there was someone that was deceased inside of the parking lot.
I saw a white Toyota Camry pulled in a parking space. The driver's side of the vehicle, the victim was laying on the ground. There was a pool of blood around her head.
She was dressed in black doctor's scrubs, and her name was embroidered on the front of her shirt.
It was definite that she had been shot. Next to the body, there was a magazine from a handgun, a spent round, and a shell casing.
The police request the attendance of the medical examiner.
The medical examiner did arrive at the scene, and he was able to confirm that she was deceased from one gunshot wound to the head. The bullet entered in the back of her skull and actually came out underneath her chin area.
The police have already been able to confirm the identity of the deceased.
The officers, prior to my arrival, checked the license plate on the car,
and that came back as Kendra Hatcher being the owner of the vehicle, which matched what was on her shirt also.
Detectives now begin to examine what evidence they can find.
The cell phone at the scene was given to the homicide investigators. Obviously, they wanted to find out what numbers had been recently called or dialed on that phone, what messages had come in. The pistol magazine, which was also found at the scene with 13 live rounds in it, I took back to our crime scene lab and processed for latent prints.
We looked for her purse, and we found out that her purse was missing. And so we just began doing our normal course of investigation, looking for witnesses and also video cameras inside the parking garage.
Officers established Kendra Hatcher's last movements.
I found out that Kendra was actually a resident in that building and that she was on her way home from work. September 2nd was her last day at work for a few days because she was going on a vacation.
Kendra's fiancé, Ricky Paniagua, soon arrives.
One of the most painful parts of this whole story that I think of is that Ricky, the fiancé, was coming back into the apartment complex with dinner, and there was something going on. There were like police ropes and sirens and things were going on. He didn't know what was going on.
After speaking with him for a couple minutes, Ricky was able to tell me that him and Kendra had been dating for several months, and he was meeting Kendra at her apartment that evening to have dinner. Once he found out that we found Kendra deceased, you could just see just the color go from his body. He almost went into a state of shock once he was able to connect the dots.
Police begin to piece together more information about Kendra.
She had a very humble life growing up. Her mother owned a blanket shop in Springfield, Illinois. She was a cheerleader in high school. And she also was very devoted to her religion.
She was a rising star in her world of dentistry. She was someone that helped many, many people.
She worked with a clinic in the mid-cities of between Dallas and Fort Worth that specialized in lower-income kids because she wanted to help kids.
She also volunteered her time giving back to poor children in South America, donating her abilities as a dentist and her time and her effort to help kids that couldn't afford dentistry.
In recent months, Ricky and Kendra have become very close.
She had told her family that she was super excited about meeting this guy. She said that they're clicking and that, he's a dermatologist and that they would probably end up moving in a year or so after his residency ended. And she just seemed to be really super happy and excited about life.
The most immediate clue to what has happened to Kendra comes from the footage captured on the apartment complex's security camera system.
On the surveillance footage, we were able to see the victim come in to the parking garage and go to a normal parking space. We also found a footage of an older model Jeep Cherokee. This Jeep Cherokee was waiting in the visitor portion of the parking garage, and they followed another vehicle in and parked in a parking space before our victim got there.
She started to get out of her car. An assailant walked up and basically executed her, shot her in the head, took her purse, and fled.
The individual walked back to the back seat of the Jeep. The Jeep went out the wrong direction in the parking garage, made a U-turn, and then they exited.
But there are limitations to what the police can see on the CCTV.
After looking at the video, there was no way we could tell what kind of license plate was on that vehicle. And we had information that it may have been a paper tag.
Police feel the public might be able to help them.
They made the decision to release that tape to the public and say, hey, has anybody seen this vehicle, or do you know what's going on, or this is, this is very much of interest to us. And I think that was very, very key for them because that helped move the case along.
I felt like there was more to the story. There was no random circumstance that caused this murder. That they were there for a specific reason, and they were waiting on our victim.
Police have some security footage, a murdered woman and a distraught fiancé. But they have little else to point to a motive for what clearly is the clinical killing of Kendra Hatcher. Dallas, Texas, 2015. Police are investigating the murder of 35-year-old dentist Kendra Hatcher. Most of the incident has been caught on security footage. Detectives have released the tape publicly in the hopes it might elicit a response and information. It does.
The media interest, it did help the case, obviously. I mean, when the news footage of the Jeep Cherokee leaving the garage, that jump-started the investigation when the owner called in.
The man is Jose Luis Ortiz, and he claims he lent his Jeep to a friend, Brenda Delgado.
Jose called in and said that he loaned his Jeep the same day of the murder to Brenda Delgado. Jose actually gave us a phone number for Brenda, and we called her. She told us, I'm house sitting for a friend over in Irving, and I don't have a ride, but if you can come pick me up, I'll come talk with you.
With this connection to the vehicle, Brenda Delgado immediately becomes a person of interest. Detectives try to establish more about her and her background.
Her parents immigrated from Mexico to America, so she still had dual citizenship in both countries. They were good working class folks. She graduated from an area high school. There wasn't money to go to college, so she started working. She got interested in the dental field. She was coming back to school and slowly finishing dental hygienist school when she was in her 30s.
The interesting thing about Brenda Delgado is that she is the former girlfriend of Ricky, the fiancé of Kendra Hatcher.
She had been with Mr. Paniagua several times, dating him. They broke it off. He then met Kendra Hatcher.
Brenda was, by all means, crazy in love with him, fascinated by him. They met the first time, got together, had a relationship. He broke it off. And then at some point after that, they started to get together casually. I would assume that meant they were probably hooking up, but it wasn't anything more. It wasn't a romantic relationship or a long-term relationship.
However, Brenda doesn't see things that way.
There were times where she would seem emotionally unstable. There would be times where she would be overly clingy and just kind of overly attached to him. And I felt like, that kind of fit in with the theme on this case, more so than a robbery.
It appears her view of the relationship has become obsessive.
He would be out for a run on Katy Trail here in Dallas, and she would suddenly run into him, make it appear that it was coincidental when in fact it wasn't. She was stalking him. So I think at that point she was just obsessed and she wanted to get him back any way she could.
For police, it's time to get face-to-face with Brenda Delgado.
Brenda gets called in for a voluntary interview, and she's cooperative. The Dallas police, smart as a bug, those folks taped everything.
Brenda gives the detectives her version of how she spent Wednesday, September 2nd, the day Kendra Hatcher was murdered.
Wednesday, I was in Carrollton,
Okay.
and I studied from maybe 12 all the way to about 6. And then from 6 we went to Fuzzy's. We had some tacos at Fuzzy's in Carrollton.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Who were you studying with?
Billy, this guy, my classmate.
Okay. So how'd you get to Carrollton?
I got a ride to Carrollton.
Okay. Who gave you a ride?
Who gave me a ride? My friend, Crystal.
Crystal. Mm-hmm. She told me that early that morning she met up with her friend Crystal. They were having some problems with their vehicle, and she took it to Jose's shop. Jose's a mechanic. Jose looked at it and told her that he needed to work on it, and she borrowed his Jeep. She said that she had a study date that day with some friends, and Crystal dropped her off at a public library, and she spent most of the day studying. She also told me that the library had cameras, and it also had a sign-in log that I could check for her signature.
This level of detail immediately raises a red flag.
Most people don't pay attention to locations having cameras or sign-in logs. It was like it was already pre-formatted.
Brenda can also supply very specific details about where she was at the time of Kendra's death.
When I go to Chili's.
How did you get to the Chili's?
Billy took me.
Billy gave you a ride at Chili's?
No.
Okay.
I have the receipt in my bag. I can tell you exactly. It's on my clothes down.
Okay.
She probably figured if she just showed the receipt, an officer would say, sure, you weren't there, thank you, and that would be over. Fortunately, that's not the way it works in the world of crime.
Most people, when they come down and talk about murder, they're really nervous and kind of taken back. Either they're going to be overwhelmed emotionally because someone lost their life. They're going to be afraid because they're being questioned at a homicide investigation. She didn't seem to match any of those descriptions. She was very cool, calm, and collected, and very organized.
Detectives begin to get more specific with Delgado.
This is the picture of young lady that got killed. Never seen her before?
I've never seen her.
Okay.
First, they started with Kendra Hatcher. Do you know this person? No, I've never met her. Well, she's engaged to Ricky Patiago. Do you know him? Oh, well, yes, Ricky and I are very close, but we're just friends now.
Detective Barnes needs to find out more about the vehicle used when the murder occurred.
I began to press her on who had had this Jeep. So when I pressed her on her location and whether she was driving the Jeep, she pointed a finger at Crystal and said, you need to talk with her.
Detectives now bring Brenda's friend, Crystal Cortez, in for questioning.
So she is in the police headquarters at the same time Brenda is, and they're interviewing both of them, taping both of them, and then super helpful for information back and forth.
There was a lot of different stories from Crystal. The first version was that she was looking for a parking space because she was going out to eat at a nearby restaurant. And she just happened to park inside the parking garage at the Gables 17. And she heard a loud noise and decided to leave the parking garage.
When I was up there, I heard a shot. Pow. I have my son in the back. So I said, no, you know what? Let me get out. I'm coming out. There's a guy running with a mask right in front of me. He stops. He looks dead at me. And I'm just like, horrid. I'm shaking literally at this point because I have my son in the back.
I confronted her with the fact that I actually saw someone get out of her vehicle and walk towards Dr. Hatcher.
Immediately, Crystal's story changes.
Crystal starts making up stories about she was just driving along the park with her son, and this scary man jumped in and told her to drive or he was going to kill her. And then she drove to the apartment complex and had no idea what happened.
However, she's confronted with the fact that there's no sign of anyone who could be considered to be her son on the tape.
Who else was in the vehicle with you?
Just my son, and he was asleep in the back, honestly.
No. That's not going to work either. I want to be able to trust you, and I want to be able to believe you. And I know that what you're telling me is not true.
She switched up the story to be this friend of Brenda's and her drove into the apartment complex, and the motive was going to be robbery, and then she was just going to drive the getaway car, and they were going to be away with some money, and she was going to get $500, and they were going to scare Kendra.
But Crystal Cortez has done no more than implicate herself.
When Crystal admitted that Brenda paid her $500 to go to the parking garage with this unknown male who was armed with a firearm, she self-admitted she put herself at the crime scene. That was enough to charge her. We charged her with capital murder.
Meanwhile, Brenda is still being interviewed by detectives.
The more I watched Brenda Delgado, the more I just knew she was lying. They kept the film running when they would leave the room or do you want to take a bathroom break or do you want some snacks or whatever. So they were friendly to her, but there would be times when she was on camera by herself, the detectives were out of the room talking to Crystal Cortez. She was just like, oh. And she was doing things like this, and I think she was realizing the trouble that she had stepped into and that what was happening while the detectives were interviewing her.
Agent Barnes now turns up the heat on Delgado.
I began pressing Brenda really hard about where she was at, what she was doing, and why they were there, and what they were there for. And I think that once I began pressing buttons, Brenda felt like she was going to unravel and end up being charged. And she just asked for an attorney.
Brenda clearly hasn't been to the scene of the murder. Detectives don't have enough evidence to charge her, but instinctively they know she is involved in some way.
They felt they did not have enough to issue a warrant for arrest for murder, but they wanted to hold her. They ran her background check, and she had a whole bunch of parking violations, enough to be arrested.
Collectively, we decided it would be better to just put her in jail for her traffic tickets than to charge her with murder and have to release her if we couldn't find enough details to prove it at that point.
But Brenda has other plans.
As soon as somebody comes down here, or she on her own pays the $300 or $400 that's owed, whatever's the fine that's not paid, as soon as you pay that, they release you immediately. And so it's not like you're sticking them in jail on some kind of a serious charge where they're going to have to wait and see a judge, and you're going to have to go through at least an 18-hour process. You're putting her in there. She's going to be out potentially in a couple, 2 to 4 hours, which she was.
We found out that she left jail, she called a taxi to a local hospital, and she called her father and asked her father to pick her up.
Within hours, Brenda Delgado flees the state and crosses the border into Mexico.
She already had her backup plan in place, and at that point, we were just playing catch-up.
Detectives now believe that Brenda Delgado is at the center of the murder of Kendra Hatcher.
All of the early indicators on this investigation seem to point back to Brenda. Jose didn't know Kendra. Crystal didn't know Kendra. It all pointed back at Brenda. Brenda had the motive to want Kendra dead.
In Dallas, Texas, police are hunting for Brenda Delgado, a suspect in the murder of 35-year-old dentist Kendra Hatcher. Delgado has fled to Mexico, but investigators are continuing to question Crystal Cortez, Delgado's accomplice, who drove the Jeep from which the killer emerged to shoot Kendra. However, they are still trying to identify the shooter.
Just crunching down phone records between Brenda, Crystal. We also located a phone inside Brenda's apartment. We got phone records for that number, and all of these phones had a common phone number that they were communicating with. And we were able to locate that phone number and do some subpoenas for the phone records on that phone.
Police reach out to federal agencies for assistance.
The FBI got involved about a month after it happened. At the time, they hadn't identified the shooter in the case. They only knew him as Chris, so they were looking for help in that regard. They had a telephone number for Chris. We were able to obtain a search warrant to obtain the real-time location information associated with that phone. The pings on the phone brought us to an apartment complex in South Dallas.
That same day, Crystal is brought in for further questioning.
So there was the blue Sebring part right there.
Okay, was it an older looking Sebring?
No, this is like, it's your. Maybe
like discolor blue or dark blue?
No. It's a shiny blue.
She gives me a description of the shooter's car, and she said he drives a blue Chrysler Sebring. I picked my phone up and I called the FBI agents that were doing surveillance out in this parking lot and gave them the car description, and they told me that they see the car in the same parking lot. By watching the phone pings, they noticed the phone started moving, and they also noticed that the blue Chrysler Sebring was moving at the same time that the cell phone was moving. And it pulls over in a parking lot a couple blocks away from this apartment complex, and they walk up to him and make contact.
The man is Christopher Love. He is taken into custody and the car is impounded.
The car was towed to the auto pound, and I began interviewing Christopher Love. I interviewed him all the way through the course of the night into the early morning hours of October 2nd.
Searching the car, they didn't really find anything, and it was a little bit of a dead end.
Detectives have drawn a blank, so they turn to another police resource to intensify the investigation.
A canine that was in training at the time was brought to the Dallas Auto Pound. The canine had been trained to find explosives. That could be anywhere from gunpowder to bomb material C4.
They sniffed the car. The dog wisely stopped at a couple places. They found some residue, but they didn't find enough evidence yet. And then the dog zoomed in on the console in between the driver's and passenger seat, up one side and down the other. So that was super helpful. The investigators were able to remove the panel, and lo and behold, what's in there? A gun.
Christopher Love is confronted with what the canine has managed to uncover.
Once I showed him a picture of the firearm, it was like somebody letting the air out of a balloon. His body language, he just kind of sunk down in his chair. His head dropped. He tells me, okay. I was there. I was with Crystal. I got out of the Jeep to walk over to get Kendra's purse, and Crystal fired a shot from the Jeep out the window, and it hit Kendra. And he goes back into the Jeep, and they drive away.
But Detective Barnes knows better.
I saw the video, and what he was describing was a scene out of a James Bond movie. There was no way that Crystal could throw the car in reverse, shoot out a passenger window while backing up, hit someone in the head, and one shot get it done. And also the magazine to the firearm was laying next to the body. So I knew that my shooter was there, close range, and standing beside Kendra whenever she died. There's a video camera from the parking garage on the other side. And that's how I know which side of the vehicle you got out of. And only one person got out of that vehicle.
I hopped in the jobs.
That one person that got out. The one person that got out of that vehicle was you. I actually pressed him a little bit about being the shooter. And when he didn't feel like there was any way out, and there's no way to explain it other than to tell the truth, he asked for a lawyer. Well, I can tell you, man, that as far as this thing goes, that and so once he terminated the interview, I went back to my desk and began typing his murder warrant, capital murder warrant, and he knocked on the door again. He wanted to sit and talk with me, and I told him I had to read his Miranda warning again if he wanted to talk, and he said okay. And he just wanted to ask me one question. He wanted to know, why did we let Brenda go? I thought it was pretty significant. I thought that was him saying, hey, you got me, now I want you to get her.
Crystal Cortez is also bowing to the inevitable.
I really want to go home to my baby.
You're not trying to cover for
No, I'm not covering anybody. I don't want nothing to do with this. I want to go home now. I really do. I want to go to my baby, okay?
I understand that.
I'm helping you guys with everything I can. I just want to go home to Ivan, okay? I know you guys are trying to help me. I'm trying to help you out. I'm not trying to cover for anybody.
So Crystal was charged with capital murder. At some point, she agreed to a deal. The deal was, if you are truthful and if you can testify against Brenda, we will recommend you for 35 years to life. You will be pleading guilty to capital murder.
They needed Crystal to get to Brenda. It's the only opportunity for her. 17 and a half years, you're eligible for parole. You may or may not get it, but you're eligible. She's got a child. She's got to be thinking about a whole lot of things, and she doesn't want to be locked up till the day she dies.
She was the one that kind of put the pieces together for law enforcement, kind of explained what happened and allowed law enforcement to arrest the other people that were involved in it.
Detectives know they have Crystal and Christopher, but now the spotlight turns to Brenda Delgado. They strongly suspect that she has manipulated the other two.
One of the things that I learned working this case, that Brenda was very good at reading people. She was able to sit down with someone, figure out who that person was, figure out where they were at in life, and specifically what they needed in life.
It was a business transaction for them. Should we beat him up? Should we kill her? Should we... they just handled it as if it was business.
She actually offered Crystal $500. At the time, Crystal was a single mother. She was out of work because her vehicle wasn't working, and she needed some mechanic work done to her vehicle, and she didn't have the money to get it done. Brenda was able to figure out that she needed money to be able to go to work every day and take care of her child, and so she just kind of dangled that carrot in front of Crystal to get her to participate in this murder.
And it is becoming apparent that Brenda had lied to Christopher in order to manipulate him even further.
Christopher Love was a self-proclaimed low-level drug dealer that just moved to this Dallas area, and he wanted to be Scarface. He was looking forward to being the next up-and-coming drug dealer in Dallas, and Brenda picked up on that, and that's what she offered him. She told Christopher that she was part of the drug cartel and that Kendra was actually stealing drugs from the cartel, and if he participated in this murder, that he get a lifetime supply of drugs.
At the center of everything appears to be Brenda's jealousy of Ricky's newfound happiness with Kendra.
I think her obsession with Kendra Hatcher and losing Dr. Paniagua was stronger than anything she could think of. She just had one goal in mind, and that was to either hurt Dr. Paniagua, which was one of the very first things that came into their minds, or remove Kendra Hatcher from the picture.
On Brenda's phone, we looked into the notes portion of her phone, and we found an email address for Ricardo and also a password. Based on our interviews with Crystal told us that Brenda was able to track Ricardo, and she was able to know where he was at.
When Ricky and Brenda were hooking up the second time around, Ricky was still helping her, so they had a joint cell phone account, and apparently that account gave her access to his phone online. She had put tracking software on his phone. She was able to know where that phone was, where he was.
She would find his location, and she would go and watch him, and then she would go have casual encounters where she would randomly bump into him and have conversations with him.
And her obsession also extended to Kendra.
In Brenda's phone, she had a bunch of pictures and videos she downloaded from Kendra's Facebook page. She had been stalking Ricardo and Kendra at the same time, just kind of staying up with their relationship. And I think she used social media as a way just to kind of figure out what they were doing.
It is becoming clear that Brenda was going to do whatever it took to achieve her objective.
Not only had she approached Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love, we interviewed some people that she had approached before about trying to convince them to do the same thing. Namely, her cousin, having him attack Kendra Hatcher with a baseball bat. He ultimately declined to do so. So she had been trying to find someone who would carry this out for some time.
Crystal had got in deep and was doing what Brenda wanted.
And speaking with Crystal, she told me that she started going around just talking to people that they knew about, where they could get a gun, and also if they would be willing to help them in this murder. And through a mutual friend, a gentleman by the name of Kelly Ellis, Kelly knew Christopher Love, and he introduced them.
For whatever reason, they just fell in, and the ball started rolling, and Crystal started agreeing to these things, and she found a shooter for Brenda. She agreed to drive the getaway vehicle. She helped Brenda get rid of evidence after the fact for $500 and some drugs.
Delgado was across the border, in her mind, safe from the authority of U.S. law enforcement.
My arrest authority ends in the state of Texas, and I think Brenda knew that. She felt like she was out of reach of the Dallas Police Department. But what she didn't plan for was that we have a partnership with the FBI, and they've got worldwide jurisdiction.
When people try to flee the U.S. to another country to escape justice, that always is a thorn in my side. So I always give those cases a little extra attention because I want to make sure that these people get caught and brought back to the U.S. I don't want people thinking that they can flee our borders and not answer the charges that are brought against them.
The FBI felt like the longer that she was free, the longer that she was evading law enforcement, that we were at risk for her committing another offense.
Dallas police now move to make Brenda Delgado an international fugitive from justice.
We were able to get her on the FBI most wanted list. I was pretty excited about it because I knew that I would get my shot at her again.
In 2016, Dallas police and the FBI are continuing their investigation into the murder of 35-year-old dentist Kendra Hatcher. Investigators have apprehended the man who pulled the trigger, Christopher Love, and the getaway driver, Crystal Cortez. However, they are still searching for the woman they believe orchestrated the crime, Brenda Delgado, who is a fugitive in Mexico and on the FBI's most wanted list. Detectives and agents now intensify their search for Delgado.
We started interviewing extended family members to see if we could get any cooperation from them. Initially, we weren't successful. They didn't want to cooperate, but ultimately some of them did. And that was very helpful in ultimately locating her.
I believe the phone was instrumental in tracking. They were able to pick up who she was calling and where money transfers were being made for her to have money to live on out there.
We received information that her family was sending her money via some money transfer business, and we were able to corroborate some of that. We saw some money going down to a state in Mexico where we knew she had relatives.
This information is further corroborated by a tip directly to investigators.
We received information that Brenda was at a specific location in Mexico, and the tipster began providing detailed information of where Brenda was at.
It allowed us to identify her exact location in Mexico, and we relayed that to Mexican Interpol officers, and they arrested her, within hours after we passed on that information.
Texas authorities moved to extradite Brenda Delgado from Mexico to the United States.
It's a long process to do that. I mean, our State Department has to reach out to whoever's the comparable authority in Mexico City. I mean, I don't remember how long that process took, but 6 months to a year. It was a good while.
For the process to work, certain conditions must be met.
Brenda was a dual citizen, Mexico citizenship and American citizenship. And Mexico has a standing policy that they do not extradite any of their nationals, any of their citizens, into a death penalty situation.
The deal was that she would not be put to death here in the States. So in order for us to apprehend her and bring her back, we had to agree to that.
We flew to Mexico on October 5th of 2016. We met Mexican authorities in a hangar at the airport. We searched her. We placed the restraints on her that she would be wearing on the flight. We were able to board the flight before any of the other passengers through the back entrance and flew back to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport nonstop.
I actually met her when she arrived here. I was the first face that she saw when she walked in the airport hangar. I'm a pretty competitive person, and even though I didn't get a chance to interview her again, in my mind, I was like, I told you I was going to get you.
Prosecutors now need to prepare for 3 trials: Brenda Delgado, Crystal Cortez, and Christopher Love.
I've been working in the Dallas Homicide Unit for a little over 9 years. And out of every murderer that I've come across, Christopher Love is about as cold as any murderer that I've dealt with. No sign of remorse, no sign of emotion, no sign of regret.
This is a vicious, vicious, vicious person.
Christopher Love was sentenced to death. he's still on death row from what I understand, and I don't know if a date's been set yet for that.
Crystal Cortez's fate has already been more or less agreed.
Crystal was charged with capital murder as well, based on her agreement to testify against Christopher and also to testify against Brenda. She was given 35 years in prison.
In the case of Brenda Delgado, prosecutors paint a picture of a ruthless manipulator.
They did a great job at pointing out the specific facts of this investigation and just kind of like laying out who Brenda was. You know, that she's not just this pretty face that you see sitting in a courtroom, that this lady's a monster.
I don't think she even thought much about covering her tracks. It was all about getting this done. This focus of, I need to get Kendra Hatcher out of the way so I can get Ricky back.
Brenda had a very blank look on her face, almost like she was in disbelief that she was actually sitting in this courtroom and that she was being held accountable for what she did.
I don't really know that she felt right and wrong. I don't really know that she felt any guilt. The best word I can come up with is sociopathic.
She just appeared to be very nonchalant and like everything was okay, and it would be until the very end.
When the jury deliberate, they aren't long about coming to a decision.
So I was going down the escalator, and this is, we're less than 20 minutes since the jury went out, and I get a text message, we've got a verdict.
I think we startled some folks. We came back in a half an hour. It was not flippant, however. It was not off the cuff. We came back into the jury room, and someone suggested that we take a sample vote. This is the gut check vote. Let's just write down what we think, and then we'll start talking about it. So a woman volunteered to capture the notes. We all wrote down what we thought, and she opened them up, and they were all in one pile, one after the other. Guilty, 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 guilty.
That's very unusual. In a capital murder case, for the jury to come back, I heard estimates of 18 to 20 minutes that they deliberated. Yeah, that's unheard of. So they were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she committed this crime. First and foremost, this was a Dallas Police Department homicide investigation. And everybody understood their roles, and everybody understood that the primary goal was to identify everybody who was involved in this murder for hire and to get everybody arrested and in a courtroom to face the charges against them. And I think every agency did a great job at that.
I think working cases like this just makes it hard for you to trust individuals. But on a positive note, it's kind of offset by all the positives that I learned from working with the family and also the detectives on this case.
There may be a victory of sorts in the convictions, but for the family of Kendra Hatcher, there is just loss.
The thing that bothered me the most about this case was this could have been anyone. Kendra is a truly innocent victim, and she never saw any of this coming. For her to be ambushed and assassinated in a parking garage like an animal, it bothered me. And it is one of those things that you just never forget.
It's such a senseless, tragic loss of life that didn't need to happen. Just the lengths that someone would go to try to get back with an ex-boyfriend. That's very chilling, and it's a stark reminder of kind of the world we live in.
Nothing anyone can do will bring Kendra Hatcher back, and for her family, the pain of losing her endures.
For the family, I don't feel there's closure. The word is a great word. We hear it and we think curtains are shut and we can no longer see what's behind them. But I do not believe that there is true closure in a case like this.
Their daughter, sister, was taken from them in an instant, without any warning and without any reason. So I don't know how you come to terms with that. It's got to be extremely difficult.
We can never bring back Kendra, but we can say, hey, we got the people that were responsible.
2011, Pottawatomie County, Iowa. A shooting is reported.
We were told that there had been shots fired and possibly somebody had been shot.
They find Patty on the kitchen floor with pools of blood all around her.
This particular firearm that was used in this incident was a shotgun, so it's actually shotgun shells that were in the residence.
The perpetrator is quickly apprehended, and the motive soon becomes clear.
He went into a jealous rage, but it wasn't the first time.
Whatever measures he needed to take to make sure that he could control her, he was going to do that.
Just the thought, if I can't have her, nobody can have her.
The victim fights bravely for her life, but sadly succumbs to her injuries almost 2 years later.
No likelihood of recovery. She was removed from life support and she died.
We kind of thought that, she had made it that many months, that she was in the clear and could maybe live a healthy life and move on.
This is the story of a relationship racked with jealousy, the tragic death of a mother of 4, and how her killer attempts to evade justice.
It was just the thought that if I can't have you, nobody will have you.
They're shooting. Oh,
Okay, sir.
We need to hurry up.
Okay, is anybody injured?
Yes. Okay.
17th of June 2011. The Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office receives an urgent 911 call.
Okay, stay on the line here with me. What are you hearing, sir? What are you hearing?
I don't hear anything right now. I heard 2 gunshots, but nobody's talking anymore.
The caller is Ben Shimmin. He is with his friend Patty Harker and claims an ex-boyfriend of Patty's called Craig is threatening them with a gun.
Once the 911 call was made, you could immediately hear the screaming, the yelling, mostly Craig and Patty trying to explain. We're just friends. We're just friends. We've been together before. Calm down. And Craig was using profanities, saying, "What the hell are you doing?" So on and so forth.
Deputies are dispatched to the scene, while dispatch keeps talking to the caller.
It's about a 19-and-a-half-minute 911 call, and it's interesting to me, I suppose, just professionally, in that there's a lot of very, sort of emotional things going on, and yet the caller, Ben, was locked in a bathroom at the time, and he's pretty calm as he's sort of relaying what's going on.
You know what kind of a gun it was?
First initial call came out. I was acting supervisor that night. We were dispatched, 2 of us were dispatched to domestic disturbance. All they told us that there was possibly 3 individuals involved. It's a high priority call because you don't know exactly what's going to happen, so you want to get there, fairly quick.
Pottawatomie County is almost 1,000 square miles. It's a pretty good-sized county. And so, there may be 3 deputies on patrol in the rural area of the county. So it's not like you just get a 3-minute response. He's somewhere in the eastern side of the county. And so he's actually driving as he has the address he knows he's heading to. We've got his cruiser video. And so he, at one point, actually passes Craig. He actually goes to a farm driveway, turns around, and starts a pursuit.
As I keep getting relayed information as I'm going, I was heading south on 330th. We were told that there had been shots fired and possibly somebody had been shot. The whole call turns into a whole different situation. Shooter or the possible suspect had been left the area in a pickup truck. And it was like shortly after that I noticed headlights coming at me on the road. I have to make a decision whether I'm going to go after the vehicle or not. So I turn around on the vehicle and then I start to go after it, and then I can't get on the radio. I'm trying to get a hold of the other officers and they're not answering. I'm trying to relay information of, what the vehicle is, who possibly is in the vehicle.
Thôi mà tao không lây mày đâu phải lo ha.
Cô con người vô lo vô nghĩ như em thì
hãy nhốt tao ở nhà đi Vân ơi, tao không ra đường nữa đâu.
Nhốt ở nhà, nó ở nhà động con dao mà chết cơ mà.
Lúc đấy tao rửa con dao mày, tao rửa nhá, tao chỉ phát ra này phát.
Nhưng mà bình thường mình chỉ động cũng làm sao đâu, ai ấy cả.
Thôi mà tao thấy bình thường.
Cái vòng đấy điểm lắm, chả thấy gánh hộ đâu.
Đéo
là cũng
gì.
có gánh hộ, nếu không thì chắc chỉ đứt cả ngón tay.
Cái mồm mày tao vả cho cái rồi. Nhỏ này kỳ lắm. Các bạn nhớ nối thật là cẩn thận nhé, nhìn nó sẽ đẹp hơn đấy. Mình sẽ xoay ngang bức tranh này ra để vẽ cho dễ hơn nha. Mới đầu tháng ạ. Lôi ấy ra cắt luôn. Lôi máy ra cắt luôn. Hôm mùng 1 đây tao lôi máy ra tao cắt.
Nếu ai cắt tóc vào mùng 1.
Đéo biết, ai biết, đêm hôm đấy.
Lông tay lông chân mình cắt đấy.
Đã ha. Ai phải để ý đâu. Chả để ý đến mùng 1 cơ. Xong đến lúc thằng Thành nó ngã mới nhớ ra là mùng 1. Chắc bạn Thành cái nghiệp cho mình chứ hôm đấy mình mà tông vào thì cũng váng đầu. Vân này giờ tao phải lôi mày về với Chúa thôi. Chứ mày cứ tin người ta thế này chết dân. Vân ạ, mình bên đạo mày không được tin đâu.
Nói gì đây?
Nhanh, mai đi xưng tội, nhanh. Lương y như từ mẫu. Nghe hài vậy. Mặc dù đấy là một câu nó rất là đắt giá mà mình nói chuyện nghe cái tiểu phẩm ấy, tếu ấy. Trước tao chơi với thằng Vương á mày. Biết thằng Vương không? Lớp phó đời sống ấy. Nào nghe.
Nói đi.
Giờ chúng nó cứ trêu thằng đấy là Phật tử.
Là gì?
Ý là trông nó cũng lành lành ấy. Phật tử đéo gì. Nhìn gái, nhìn con nhà người ta, nhìn vào ngực nó đầu tiên. Nó mất dạy. Cái con mà nó ăn mặc hay hở ấy.
Nhắc mình nhớ hôm nọ có một cái video kiểu đứa ấy nó lắc ngực người có to đùng luôn. Thế xong nó bếm con mèo lắc ngực, con mèo bên cạnh. Em cho thằng Nghị xem chắc 3 giây. Em rụt lại luôn. Em cũng chả nói gì trước nhá. Em bảo Nghị ấy xem này kìa hay vãi. Tại vì em sẽ nói kiểu khác thì sẽ nghĩ ngay ấy. Em nói thế cho xem 3 giây em cùng lại. Em hỏi là thế con mèo có thứ như nào? Nó trả lời đúng hết mà. Đến mắt con mèo còn biết.
Thằng này nó xem trước mày rồi. Mày đã bị lừa. Sợ chưa?
Tại vì mấy cái đấy chỉ có em xem thôi chứ nó không đâu. Lấy điện thoại nó thì có mấy cái đấy. Và thấy đâu tận thấy đá bóng xong mấy cái cũng mua lần đất. Cái nào thì không gửi.
Mẹ thằng Cảnh con cười. Thằng Cảnh nó cứ thách. Bạn lướt đi. Lướt mấy cái thứ hai. Tức là
hôm đấy em lướt 20 cái cơ mà còn không thấy.
Mức quá. Mình sẽ viền thật là chậm để cho nó được đều hơn này. Mình đã viền xong hai cái quả lê này rồi, mình sẽ vẽ xuống tiếp là hai chiếc lá ở bên cạnh này nhé.